This podcast is a member of the Place to Be Nation family. Visit us at placetobenation.com, the only place to be in your pop culture world.
Welcome everybody, I am joined by Dylan Hales on a special episode of a unnamed podcast really. It's just we're dropping this on the PWO feed, so we're going to call this Dylan and Allan's look at the World Tag Team League. So this is wXw's Tag League tournament that happened this last weekend in Oberhausen, Germany, which was absolutely fantastic. So I'm going to share my thoughts from a live perspective, and Dylan's going to share his thoughts from watching the VOD on wXw now. So welcome to the show, Dylan.
Welcome. Very excited to be here. You are, I'm going to butter you up a little bit. We didn't talk about this in our lengthy pre-production meeting, but you are honestly one of my favorite people to chat pro wrestling with, whether it be in Twitter or on the rare occasions where we get to talk on a podcast. So I was very excited when we sort of, over the course, I guess, the last few days, decided we were going to do this. I was very excited to do it because I think, wXw is... To me, it's my favorite promotion in Europe, and as somebody who's gotten into the promotional end, some of wrestling in the last couple of years, and more of the business aspect, as well as still being obviously a hardcore fan, they're in many ways the promotion that I look to the most when it comes to how to put on big events and like what other companies should be doing. So as we go through this, I hope that the listeners will keep in mind that, at least for me, and I hope you'll share a little bit about your experience with wXw and what you think of them as well. But at least for me, I'm looking at this not just as somebody who has some involvement in the wrestling business, not a huge involvement, but some, but also as a fan, but also as somebody who really appreciates this company and has slowly sort of developed a bigger appreciation over the course of maybe, the last year, 18 months, and really thinks that they deserve to be talked about and thought about more for the degree of the accomplishments that they've had and made. And I think this Tag League is a great opportunity to sort of look at that, both in terms of the quality of the shows and in terms of the unique nature of what they're doing.
Yeah, they are fantastic, so I just want to thank you for the high praise you gave me there. This is going to be a mutual appreciation society, because every time you're on any podcast, Dylan, I make a total point of listening to it, because I don't always agree with you, but you have well thought out takes, and for someone like myself, I love different points of view, so you really are so knowledgeable, so I'm really grateful to have you on the show. So as much as we're going to slap each other on the back, let's get to the shows. So the first show was the Inner Circle show, which was at the wXw Academy, which was in Essen, which is about, I would say, 30 minutes drive from Oberhausen, from the Turbine Hall, where the main shows are run of the weekend. And this is a great little venue, Dylan. I mean, have you been to any kind of Academy shows that any promotions have ever run?
I have been to shows like that years ago. I mean, we're talking a decade or more, like the sort of trainee shows, which obviously this wasn't entirely a trainee show given some of the quality of the wrestlers on it, but I've been in that sort of wrestling gym environment. I guess you could even argue that the Punk Pro shows over Mania weekend were kind of similar in terms of the environment. But definitely this looks like a really cool place to watch a wrestling show. I was actually going to ask if you were there. I didn't know if you were actually at this event. So I was going to ask if you were actually at the show, and B, I was going to ask how far away it was. Well, you've already answered that for me. So, but it definitely looks really cool on tape, and it looks like a fun place to see a show.
Yeah, no, I was there live. I was one of the first people to fly in. I flew in that morning, and I got to where I was staying about 11 a.m., so I had 6-7 hours to kill before the show. So, yeah, I was there. It was fantastic, and the good thing about a show like this is the actual intimacy of the venue. Watching a show with only other 100 fans, it's fantastic. It's so up close, it's so personal. I kind of equate it to, and I was saying this at the weekend, you go to watch a gig, you go and watch a music concert, and there's two types really. There's the small intimate ones, or you've got the ones that play big arenas and stadiums and things like that. And I really am not a fan of the bigger shows whatsoever, unless it's an act that I am not going to see any other way. So, for example, I saw ELO at Manchester Arena the other year. They were fantastic in that setting, and they're a band that have been going years and years, so you're not really going to see them in a smaller setting. So I kind of went to that and I enjoyed it. But on the other end, I do really prefer the smaller, more intimate, musical gigs. And it's the same with my wrestling. It's all well and good. You can go to a big arena show. You can go and watch Raw, go and watch SmackDown. It's been taped about an hour's drive from me next month in the UK. I probably will avoid it because it's too big. I just don't like wrestling in huge venues unless it's a must-see match. But kind of going to this, it's a treat. Seeing all the wrestlers up close and personal, and the calibre of them as well, Dylan. I know you mentioned you've been to Academy shows before, but if we're having matches such as Timothy Thatcher versus Volta in an Ambition Rules match on this show, it's not an Academy match in any way, shape or form.
No. I mean, this was, honestly, this card would be, the card that they put forth would be a very strong wrestling show, like a top-level wrestling show, in a building, 4 or 5 times as big. There are promotions here in the United States that do sort of versions of Academy shows or dojo shows, or whatever term you want to use. Dojo Wars out of CZW runs weekly, and they occasionally will have somebody like a Joey Janela show up, or even a David Starr, and that's really cool. But you're not going to typically see something like this. And I think, actually, to me, the most interesting thing about Inner Circle, this event, is it's kind of like that tack on for the extra hardcore people who are coming in for the tag league, flying in from another country like you did, or maybe they live in Germany, but they live a ways away, and like there's some level of commitment. If you decide to make it a bigger event, they're giving you more bang for your buck by having this show, because if you get there a little bit early, you get in, maybe you don't have anything to do, you're there for the night, you know you're going to be there the next day. What do you do? Well, you can just go to this relatively small venue and watch, people like Homicide and David Starr and Timothy Thatcher and Walter, and I mean, there's that. It's just a great way of maximizing the experience for the fans, I think. Like, very few promotions would do this even if they were capable of it, I feel. And I think that's one of the things that sets wXw apart.
Yeah, no, I totally agree there. And it's more, they do run Academy shows quite often, and I heard that they attract sometimes a different actual audience from the actual main shows. There's people that only go to the Academy shows, so in a way they've got two kind of different products in a way. So I think that's pretty cool that happens. The one thing leading up to the show, there was an announced match between David Starr and Dave Christ that was going to be a double Ironman match. So 120 minutes. So the whole show, I think, would have been that single match. And now looking back, I'm glad that we didn't see that. As much as I was intrigued by a match that would go that length, I'm not too sure if those two guys could carry that off. I don't know if any two guys could carry that off for me to maintain my attention and have a decent match for 120 minutes. So even your Okadas of this world, and all these highly touted guys that can go these 45-minute matches, these 60-minute matches, I don't think anyone really in history can do a decent 120-minute match that's going to maintain my attention throughout. I don't know about you, Dylan. What's the kind of longest match you've seen and enjoyed before?
Well, I did enjoy the Trevor Lee versus Roy Wilkins match from CWF Mid-Atlantic last year, but that match is difficult to compare to anything else. It would be especially different to compare to something that would be likely to occur in an Academy setting, because it was a match that had been built for years through storylines and whatnot, and in the middle of the match you have multiple run-ins and almost like different segments of the match that were dedicated to advancing different layers of different stories. So it was almost like you had an intermission at times from the match to go and say, oh, well, here's this story. Let's see how we can wrap this up, or let's see how we can develop this, which obviously is not going to be the case in a match like this. It's just, no pun intended, but it's not as ambitious as what Trevor Lee and Roy Wilkins and what CWF was trying to do. This would probably have been more of I don't want to say an exhibition, because that probably isn't fair, but I think it would have likely been more exhibition-y. And honestly, to me, getting to see, David Starr versus Homicide in that environment, and just the fun match that they had, not that it was like a blowaway classic, but it was a fun little match, and, Homicide, busting out the Tope con Hilo, even in that setting, on a show where he probably could have gotten away with doing much less. To me, that was almost the perfect match for David Starr to have in that environment.
Yeah, I think the match actually suited him, and having a match like that was the main event of the show. And it wasn't a short match. It went, I think, 13 or 14 minutes, and it was a good value match. I mean, my worry going in was Homicide. My worry going into the weekend was Homicide would be really broken down, and he'd struggle a lot. But he managed all the way through. I don't think he had a bad performance throughout the weekend, and it was really cool to see him, someone I've not seen live before, in such an intimate setting. So I really enjoyed that main event. You know, someone who actually stood out to me on this, and other people maybe not as much have really talked about him, is the guy that's come over from Portugal. He's called Rafa. He's currently training at the academy, and he's living there, so he's more of a young boy. He's there. You can see him at the weekend shows, helping out, you know, ringside and doing things like that. But on this show, he fought a wXw veteran in Kim Ray. I thought for a 4 or 5 minute sprint, and Rafa being as relatively green as he is, I thought it was really enjoyable.
No, I actually agree with you. I like that match a good bit. Funny enough, Rafa kind of reminded me of a, both really in style, to a Mid-Atlantic wrestler in the United States named Ryo, who does a soccer gimmick. I just thought stylistically they were kind of the same. But that's not an insult by any stretch of the imagination. I actually liked him too, and I'm actually interested in what's going on with that Portugal scene. You know, Red Eagle worked at King of Trios for Chikara, and he's a guy that's come out of that Portugal scene, and he's, I believe, doing the Futures event for Powerbomb.tv here in a little bit over a week. So interesting to see Portugal kind of churning out some guys who are doing bigger things and going different places. I think that's neat. I think it's neat when you get to see. I mean, that's one of the cool things about wXw in general is it's become sort of a place that is a hub for wrestlers from all sorts of different places that you might not think have wrestling scenes or wrestling cultures. Mainly because of the myopia of wrestling media and what does and doesn't get covered. And so I think it's neat that there's, you know, a Portuguese guy who definitely looks to have some potential. I also think it's always neat to see Alexander James in that environment in wXw. I know a lot of people, you know, hardcore CZW fans have sort of trashed the guy. I think the guy's really talented. You know, he's not my favorite wrestler on the earth, but I think he's a good wrestler. And, I always enjoy watching him when he pops up on these shows.
Oh yeah, I think Alexander James at the moment is one of the trainers at wXw, so he's staying for the next couple of months, he mentioned, and he's training some of the younger guys like Rafa. So we went down to the actual academy, just a sidebar here, we went down to the academy on Saturday morning. We had the opportunity to go and watch some guys train and ask some questions to Walter Timothy Thatcher and Alexander James, and it was really interesting to see the guys that they were training. There was a girl there who I think was somewhere in Europe, I'm not too sure, but there's a guy there who was from Poland. There was a guy who was from America, from the US, so he was happy to fly all the way over to Europe and stay there. There was a guy from Australia, and I think there was someone else as well from somewhere in Europe. So there's definitely people. Oh, sorry, from Australia. The guy was called Dr. Butt. So shout out to Dr. Butt. He's a medical student at the moment, and he has the rectal plex as his finish. So that's one way to stand out at the moment. But these are guys that are coming over from everywhere in the world to train at wXw. So it's quite a testament to them, and to train under guys like Walter, who's the head trainer, to train under Timothy Thatcher, who's there at the moment training guys. People make a beeline and stay in Germany, in a country they don't speak the language. They're going to be more familiar, if they're not English speakers, to actually speak English, the German, and they're happy to go over there for, you know, extended periods of time to get better. And the other thing to touch on with the wXw Academy is they're really structured in the training. They have different levels, so they have a beginners, intermediate and advanced, and they stick to a training regime, so you'll practice at one thing and then you'll move on to the next thing, and you'll put guys at equal talent levels to train with each other. So it's no good having guys there that have been, you know, really competent against beginners. It's just not going to get the best out of both kind of sides of them. So that was quite interesting to kind of learn that from wXw. So I'm really impressed by the training academy in general, and to have guys like Rafa on this show was super cool. And the one thing as well to mention, he was actually late fill-in. This match, I don't believe this match was going to actually occur because we had a few problems with transportation. It was going to be Kim Ray and Jörn Simmons against Bad Bones and Ivan Kiev from Rise originally on this Inner Circle show, but there was some travel issues. There was some storms in Germany at the time, so they couldn't make it in. So Rafa did this match at short notice, and I couldn't tell. I didn't have any nerves to me, and I think, like you said, he made a good showing for himself. And the same with Alexander James. Not someone really I've been aware of totally. I know he's worked CZW, he's worked elsewhere in the US on indies. The guy's got his head screwed on. His guy's got his fundamentals down, and as a trainer watching him, he was happy to kind of discuss different elements of even things like locking up with the students. So he was saying, I want something in the lockup. It doesn't need to be weak, but you can do the kind of standard lockup, or you can even do a Terry Rudge lockup where you're slapping. As long as it's making a noise, it's going to get a reaction. That's a good thing. So kind of hats off to Alexander James there for the Terry Rudge mention. That impressed me with him.
Yeah, anybody who mentions Terry Rudge is probably going to get points with us. But
yeah, no, definitely.
Alexander James, I really do think he's very fun. Very good heel. Underrated, and I'm glad that he's over there and working with these guys. I mean, really, if you look at this Inner Circle show, though, obviously the big match that everybody was, excited for coming in was Timothy Thatcher versus Walter under Ambition Rules. I mean, do you want to give a rundown of what exactly constitutes Ambition Rules? I mean, the sort of surface-level way to put it would be shoot style, but there is a little bit more to that. And I guess in the context of that also, Allan, I want to ask you, do you think this match sort of lived up to the idea people had in their head?
Well, for me, definitely, it met all expectations I had going in. I understand it wasn't going to be like a 4.5 star match. I mean, there's confines that they've got to work towards. I mean, some of those rules for people the uninitiated. I mean, there's no fish hooking, no joint manipulation, no choking, no low blows or grabbing trunks, and there's rope breaks as well. And it's normally submission victory on these or KO. So this match in this setting was absolutely phenomenal. I mean, wXw run these Ambition shows. They've run 8 of them in the past, and they're going to be running the 9th one at Carrot next year. And these are 8-man tournaments, single elimination, that run on a Saturday afternoon. So these are totally different style than what you're going to see on the night shows for wXw. And they're fantastic. I mean, I watched the Carrot shows. I was sat with the wXw promoter, Christian Jacobi, to watch them. And this guy, this is his wheelhouse. He was watching this Ambition 8 show at 16 Carat in March, and just a grin all the way through the show, nodding his head, clapping. He was having the time of his life watching this, and you can understand why. It was a really fascinating style to put certain guys in this style to work against each other. So on the Ambition 8 show that I saw, you had Jeff Cobb, you had Matt Riddle, you had Walter, you had Thatcher, other guys as well. And to see these guys in this environment was, super, super good and super fun. So this match itself, what did you think of the match at the Inner Circle?
I really enjoyed it. I feel like you always have to be careful when you have a match like this. I mean, we run into this problem, with all sorts of indie wrestling shows, and really above the independent level, because when you're running 80 shows a year, I mean, yeah, wXw is an indie, but it almost feels like you're diminishing them in a way to just sort of... Not that there's anything wrong with indie wrestling. I'm a huge indie wrestling fan, but they have... They're what they do is, I think, bigger than people appreciate. But as for the match itself, I thought it was really good, and I thought it was a very logical match between two teammates. I mean, I think, to me, the most exciting thing about the match coming in was the fact that these are the guys who are, kind of the team, at least to my mind, the team, coming into the bigger tag league shows. And you're getting to see the team basically grapple each other to death right on the eve of the tournament itself, but it's done in a way where it doesn't feel like, oh, this is teasing dissension or some ham-fisted, sort of beating you over the head with that sort of thing. Like, not that there would have been anything wrong with that if that was what the story was, but that wasn't the story. The story was these are two guys who are, wrestling obsessed, grapple. I mean, for people who don't know, the entire idea of Ring Comp, at least as I read it, as a stable, which is, of course, the group that Timothy Thatcher and Walter are part of, I always read it as being what Catchpoint should be and was at its best in Evolve, right? Like, that's how I always view it, as this sort of interior, wrestling struggle, like people who want to prove they're the best, and it's almost like a cultish Fight Club level quality to it. but not so far that it becomes cartoony. There's like it's like the for American listeners, and Allan, you may get the reference too because you're a smart guy. It's almost like the Teddy Rooseveltian idea of a masculine man or something. And I think I think getting to see them do that before the tournament, to me, actually enhanced their performance in the tournament. And I wonder if that's something that came across to live viewers, and maybe it only came across to me as somebody who viewed it on tape. But actually, I think I liked their matches in the tournament better because I'd seen them wrestle each other in that style of a match right before the tournament.
No, I totally got that watching it from a live perspective. I mean, it was like two guys that respected the hell out of each other. No cheesiness, no kind of, like you said, chicanery, no dissension between the two. This was respect of two guys who were wary of each other and each other's talents and skills in the ring. But at the end of it, you saw the embrace at the end. They were spraying the spray on each other that that they use in Japan a lot of the time that can stop a stiff joint. I think it's there to be used for, and it was those two together doing that. It was just a mutual respect that brought them even closer together as a team. That then would go on and do great things at the Tag League, and I think that really played into it. I really loved it, and the one thing I liked as well about this match was a little bit of comedy at the start, Dylan. I don't know if you saw it or not, where they couldn't understand each other. The rules were getting read out by the referee, Tass, and he would read them out in German, then Timothy Thatcher would say, I don't understand German, and then he'd read them out in English, and then Walter would say, wouldn't understand English. The crowd loved it. Those two were smiling, and they really looked like they enjoyed that little bit of comedy, because you normally see dead seriousness, especially from Timothy Thatcher. To see him smile, you could see he was going to enjoy the match.
Yeah, I totally agree, and it was the exact right kind of comedy too, because it didn't undermine that the guys are serious wrestlers. You know what I mean? Because it sometimes when you play with comedic elements, if guys are sort of super credible and that's what they are, which is, I mean, when you think of Thatcher and Walter, that might be like the thing that defines them is their credibility. Sometimes if you play with if you go too far with a comedy, it just kind of falls off a cliff. But I don't think that's... I think it was just the right bit. It was almost like, here's enough to let you know that we're having a sporting contest and we don't hate each other, but not so much to think, oh, this is a joke.
No, and the thing I liked as well was the finish. I mean, the finish was Timothy Thatcher trapped Walter in a Fujiwara armbar, and it was an instant submission. So I think that's quite a clever way of doing it. He's not fighting it. He's not fighting that because he's telling a story. He knows from training under the ring camp regime what Timothy Thatcher's moves are like, and he doesn't want to be in it for long because he doesn't want to be injured by his own partner to go into the main tournament. So as soon as the move was locked in, tap tap tap, that was it, and then they sprayed each other afterwards. So all in all, I think this was fantastic. I gave this star rating wise 3.5 stars. By all means, don't think that's bad at all, because it's not. This was 3.5 stars of brilliant grappling, brilliant wrestling, told a small story, and it was basically an entree to what was going to, a starter to see what was going to become in the rest of the weekend.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, 3.5 stars for any match on an Academy show is certainly not a criticism. And I thought it was a great appetizer, which I think is sort of what you're saying, right? Like, it set the table well for what was to come the next night.
Yes, that's it. What was your favourite match then on the show?
Oh, I mean, definitely Walter and Thatcher.
Definitely Walter and Thatcher.
I mean, there was... I didn't think anything on the show was bad. There was not a single match on the show that I disliked, but I think Walter and Thatcher was clearly the best match.
Yeah, I would go Walter and Thatcher 1, and then maybe for 2, and I really enjoyed this match, was Jackson Stone versus Jern Simmons, which is basically a bit of comedy in there. They did the old arm wrestling spot in that. But I think there was 2 big guys. Jackson Stone is someone, again, who I'm not that familiar with. He does a very traditional kind of heel gimmick where, be quiet while I take my jacket off, makes some smart aleck comments, but he's a guy that works really well, looks like a good pro wrestler, is in shape, and I think he would do really, really well if he spent 6 months next summer in the UK working the camps. I think he's a wrestler that could really benefit from that kind of style, to do that for an extended period of time. There's nothing wrong with him. I just want to see him grow as a wrestler, and I think he's got a lot of things there, and I just think he needs a bit more seasoning, really.
He actually reminded me a lot of the sort of Southern indie and, for that matter, former ROH guy Sal Rinauro. I like that's who he reminded me of as he popped up over the weekend, and that is absolutely not an insult coming from me, because anybody who knows me knows that I'm a Sal Rinauro fan.
Yeah, no, I hope that, Jackson Stone, we do get to see him again. I mean, he's all over the weekend, so we're going to talk about it again in a little bit. So have you got any final kind of comments to say about Inner Circle 4 show, or have you kind of covered everything you wanted to?
I think I've mostly covered. I think the main thing to me is that I think it's really cool both that wXw runs these Academy shows and also that there was one in place, even though they're running, 4 or 5 other shows in just the next couple of days after. It's a nice little tack on for people who are, especially for people who are traveling from out of region, to get like even more bang for their buck for the trip.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. I mean, the one thing I think that they were missing on this, and this is only a small thing, it's not really that important, it didn't take away anything my enjoyment, was they could have sold a few gimmicks there, a few t-shirts. They didn't have anything on sale, which surprised me really. They had, obviously you could buy some beer and soft drinks and things like that, soda, but to have a couple of t-shirts on sale, I think they would have sold maybe 5 or 6. So I think there was an opportunity slightly missed there, but it's not going to change the course of wXw if they don't sell those extra 5 or 6 t-shirts. So we'll move on now to night 1 of the Tag League itself. So the Tag League itself is a tournament which is 2 blocks, 4 teams in each block. You get 3 points for a win, 1 point for a draw, no points for a loss. And this is at the Turbine Hall, which is a really, really good venue. This is the second weekend I've been there. As I said before, I've been to the 16 Carat this year. And what a venue for a wrestling show. It's great. There's plenty of room. The sight lines are great on the floor or on the balcony where I luckily was to watch the shows on the whole. The atmosphere is great, and it gives you the opportunity as well to have the amazing kind of setup that wXw have, which is the huge video wall. All the guys have their own graphics on there. It looks really good. It looks really, really professional. They've got a ramp going all the way from the stage connecting to the ring that's slightly raised so it's above the fans, so they can see them when they're coming out. They've got the smoke machines, they've got the lights. I think, the presentation, we may as well talk about that now really. The presentation is fantastic. They've got the commentary teams in German there, they're doing that live. They've got the commentary teams in English there, they're doing that live as well. They've got the full mixing desk, they've got the guys controlling the lights. It's as professionally run as you'd imagine any show. I've got nothing really bad to say about the presentation. It really, really is fantastic. And the only real promotion in Europe that has done something to this level, and this is no knock on Progress, that have got great camera work, great presentation to a degree, is maybe wXw for their bigger shows. I mean, they had a big budget. There was no soul at some of the shows, unfortunately, for wXw. They were big places, they were running on a Thursday night, and they wouldn't get huge crowds. But here, for this show, the presentation was... Who's better, Dylan? You tell me. Behind, maybe Ring of Honor, the Lucha guys, WWE, and some of the Japanese promotions.
Well, I actually think they have considerably better production than Ring of Honor. I mean, to be perfectly honest. I think even with the investments that Ring of Honor's had in the last year or whatever it was, I still think wXw looks better as a product, aesthetically. Do I think that some people might, I mean, look, there is sort of a stereotypical way in which you could that somebody could look at it and say it has a very German feel, and what I mean by that is, for a lot of Americans at least, there's this idea, like there's a idea of German culture as being informed by this like almost industrial style, darker motif, right? Like, and I'm not making an insult here. That's just, I think that for a lot of Americans, there's a sort of stereotypical view of German culture in that light, which probably isn't fair, to be honest.
No, I know where you're coming from, exactly. It's like more of a cold feeling, more, like you said, industrial one. So I can see that, but it's not like that at all, and that stereotype is wrong. Everyone's awesome and lovely there, and not cold and no heart.
No, in fact, there's an element of that I do think is present in the way the show is presented, but in a way that is hip and not off-putting, right? Like, it does kind of look like a sort of, quasi-industrial look, but not in a negative way. I don't know how. It's difficult to completely develop what I'm trying to get at. But one of the things I love about the venue is it always looks bigger than it probably is. Like on tape, that building looks really big. Now, does a building need to be huge? No. But on tape, if you're presenting a product that's so well done and so professional, if you're able to make that building look bigger, it does kind of enhance the show. And I really think that building looks like, you could envision that being a 3,000 or 4,000 seat building if you didn't know any better. Just because of the way it's shot and the way they sort of produce things and the way the environment comes across not on tape, on digital media or whatever term is the appropriate term now. But I really, really like the aesthetic that wXw has. It's like the perfect combination between the sort of more intimate, I hate, the term bar show sounds beneath what I mean, but that sort of more intimate, contemporary hip wrestling show, like a Progress, for example, or maybe a Freelance in the United States, to take another example. Like, it's kind of the perfect combination between that and a bigger event. And I think it's very difficult to combine those two elements. You almost always have to sacrifice one or the other, just because of the dynamics and the building and the necessity of how you shoot things. And wXw somehow doesn't sacrifice that. They also do really cool things that no other promotion seems to do, or very few other than maybe the WWE, which is, on the video there are times in between matches where they pan to the English commentary team, who's just or I suppose the German commentary team too, who are just talking about what they've just seen and what match is coming up next. And our good buddy Allan's just standing there in his nice button-up shirt, looks real much classier than I look when I do commentary. But and I think that's a cool little thing, because it's kind of a throwback to the way promotions did things in the past, but with a little bit of a modern spin. And just little stuff like that makes the company look so much more professional. And the thing is, it probably doesn't even really cost anymore to do that. It's just no other promotion is thinking to do stuff like that.
No, I think it does. Though it's those little touches that will separate a WXW from other independent groups. And the one thing that anyone, unless they're live, is not going to appreciate is the entrances. Unfortunately, due to copyright reasons, they're not able to air the music that the wrestlers use to come out, their entrance music, but my God, it's fantastic. And the one thing that you won't notice as well is they can pump into the actual arena or into the Turbine Hall warm air and cold air. So when Rise have come out, they're pumping cold air into the arena. It fits perfectly with kind of the image they're trying to portray. And they have this loud thunder. It's part of the music, and it literally, because of the quality of this, the speaker system they got there, it rocks the Turbine Hall. It's fantastic. So all these entrances, they're out this world. I mean, I did live stream. I had the permission from wXw to live stream all the entrances, and as soon as the bell rang, everything that went on after a match, just so people could maybe get a flavour or a feel to the whole wXw environment. I mean, that is a huge part of it. And if you're already saying you enjoy it as much as you have without seeing that, Dylan, trust me, if you ever got over to Oberhausen, you'd be blown away by just how good it is with the actual music and everything added to it as well.
Oh yeah, the funny thing is even with the music overdubs, and by the way, it's always funny to hear what they choose for the music overdubs. But even with the overdubs that they have to do of the music that the wrestlers use, you can feel and see the energy coming off of both the crowd and the wrestlers themselves. I love the ramp. Look, I'm a guy who went to tons of WCW shows as a kid. I've told the story on podcast before. I used to get to go free because my best friend's father worked security at a couple of buildings in the Carolinas, and that ramp setup is such a cool throwback to me from when I was a kid that, I mean, they could almost do anything and just have a ramp and I'd be happy. But the video board is cool. I didn't even know they pumped in hot and cool air. That's amazing. And just the energy of everybody involved, the energy level feels so high. And here's the thing, it doesn't feel even though in a way I guess it is produced, right? Like, because you're producing an entrance, but it doesn't feel, there's an organic quality to it that I feel that sometimes other promotions who have, similar, like, exciting entrances don't necessarily have. Like, sometimes it feels like you're being led through the things you're supposed to do rather than just reacting, and I don't get that impression watching wXw.
No, I mean, the entrance is a huge, huge part to the entire presentation of the show, and it's utterly fantastic. So anyone who's listening to this is on the fence about going to a wXw show, especially at the Turbine Hall, maybe B16 Carat, maybe the Outdoing Anniversary show, and also the World Tag League. Really, really go out your way if you can to go. It's an experience you're not going to get anywhere else, and I'm really, really lucky to have experienced it, not just once but twice, and then again I'll be, fingers crossed, going again to the 16 Carat next year, which is already shaping up to be a huge show. 3 announcements so far. We've got those announcements, Travis Banks, Penta, and the third guy being Jeff Cobb. So already 3 good names there. Looking forward to seeing all those 3 guys. I've seen Jeff Cobb before. I've not seen the other 2 live before, interestingly, so that'll be a cool experience when I get out there. So getting back to this first night of the show then, what did you think of EYFBO? Because we've not talked about them yet. They were on the Inner Circle show. So they were a team who, going in, all I knew about them, they've worked TNA, and they're part of the overall LAX group, the Friends, or they've trained with like your Homicides, and your Loki's, guys like that. So I wasn't going in hugely excited to see them, but over the course of the weekend, they really, really won me over. They put in effort, and you could tell that they took this as an opportunity. They actually got this booking because the Chris brothers had to pull out for whatever reason, I don't know. So these guys got the booking instead. They were recommended, and they took the opportunity with both arms, and they ran with it. And they've made a fan out of me. I'm quite a critical guy, not always super high into the quote-unquote indie style all the time, but these guys, they're really, really good. Very, very innovative. One of the most innovative teams I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, I've followed EYFBO for actually quite a while. I mean, they've been Staples and Beyond and other places in the Northeast here in the United States. And, I think what really stands out to me about them is that they have a lot of double team offense. And I consider that to be kind of a lost art. You would think tag team wrestling would have a lot of double team offense just kind of as a rule, but when you really think about it, think about tag team wrestling over the last 20 years. A lot of teams, even that are together long term, they really don't cultivate that sort of idea of the combination threat, which was so critical to tag team wrestling when I was a kid and when I was growing up. It's one of the reasons, for example, that I love the Rockers, is the Rockers would always do cool things together. And like EYFBO to me is a really, really good double team wrestling team. Like they get that aspect of it better than a lot of tag teams do. I felt like they acquitted themselves very well in this tournament. I'm not going to sit here and say that they would be my number 1 team, but there were other teams, like on paper coming into this, I didn't really know what to think about, certain teams that were in the field. I didn't know how they would stack up. I didn't know how they would do in that environment. And EYFBO was kind of one of them. And I actually thought they did very well in the environment. I thought, if anything, they exceeded my expectations. And they did very well the first night and the first match, which was sort of presented on commentary and I think more generally as a sort of inter-family rivalry, as you had them, versus the Rottweilers and Homicide and Loki. And I thought that was a really, actually, maybe the best possible match that you could have had to kick off the tournament, because it wasn't a match that was how do I want to put this? It wasn't a match that wasn't, like, it could be a main event in the United States, right? But I don't know that you could main event with that in Germany. But there's a logic to it. Those teams know each other very well. And stylistically, if you look at the other matchups that took place on night 1, I don't think that any of the other matches, even setting aside what you think of the quality of the wrestlers or what the logical thing to do would be based on where the show was held and how the talent's viewed in Germany, I don't think that there's any other match that could have fit the opening slot better. It was the perfect combination of style and wrestlers for that spot on the show.
Yeah, I thought it was a great placement for the start of the show to have this match. Do you see people were excited to see Homicide and Loki? So that was always good. So it kicked off well, and I was interested that EYFBO actually went over in this. I didn't think that they would. I just thought that the veterans would have gone over to tell a different story throughout the tournament, but no problem with them going over at all in this. So I was happy that they were able to do that.
Yeah, I thought it was a good way to establish them too in front of that audience.
Yeah, no, I think that definitely helped. So we also got to see this weekend the Spirit Squad. So a lot of eyebrows were raised, Dylan, going into this, that the Spirit Squad aren't going to be able to hold their own with the other teams, but you need different elements in a tournament like this. And you knew why the Spirit Squad were there. They were going to be there as a comedy team. They were going to be there potentially to go out on 0 points. So they had a match against the Young Lions, who are a team I'm relatively new to. I've seen a couple of their matches before this to do a bit of research, and I saw Hiromu Takahashi have a match with Lucky Kid, one half of the Young Lions, on WCPW World Cup show, and he held his own against Takahashi, so I was really keen to see these guys. What did you actually initially think of the Spirit Squad being in this tournament, and also your overall thoughts on the Young Lions?
As a rule, I had no problem with the Spirit Squad being in. I agree with you that a tournament like this needs variety. I mean, I'm not going to plug my own projects at length on this show, but I am booking a trios tournament that takes place in roughly a month here in the United States, and I went out of my way to make sure that I had a couple of acts that kind of had a comedic quality to them. Not that they can't wrestle, because they can, because I think people look for that in this sort of setting. I think that's something that people want. You want to add a variety show sort of element to what you're doing. So from that perspective, I had no problem with it. From the perspective of how they performed in the tournament, they were fine. It seemed like they did well at riling up the crowd as heels, which I think was good. And I think that they seemed to get more and more over as the tournament went along, which is certainly not a negative. That would be a positive, or at least that's the way it came across. In an ideal universe, would the Spirit Squad be one of the 8 teams that I would pick for the wXw Tag League next year? No. But I don't think they were a disaster or anything like that. They were what they were. I don't think they really hurt the shows, but I also didn't. If I'm being completely honest, anytime they had a match, I was kind of thinking, all right, what's the next match? Especially after the opening bits with the mic work, where Kenny would get on the mic, which was kind of funny for what it was. This match was to me the least of the matches on this first show. I didn't hate it. If I'm being completely candid, the Young Lions I thought were the most disappointing act in the entire tournament. I didn't think they were bad. I even liked the fact that their matches seemed to be in some ways more traditionally structured than some of the other matches, even with teams that I thought were better. But their personalities never grabbed me. I never had any investment with anything they were doing, regardless of who they were in the ring with. So they came across as a team that had potential and had a sort of understanding of what their role was structurally, but that did nothing to go above and beyond and grab outside viewers. Having said that, this could be a situation where there's a big difference between being in the building and seeing them live and watching them on tape.
Well, for me, I'm going to agree with you a little bit, if I can be candid as well, that the Young Lions, going in, they were the champions. I'd seen them a few times. I was expecting them to be slightly... What's the word? Take this opportunity and run with it a little bit more. I'm not saying they didn't put the effort in. They just missed the mark slightly for me over the course of the weekend. They were fine. They didn't not deserve to be there by any means. I'm not here to bury them. I just thought they were slightly disappointing for me as well. Just one of those things, unfortunately. Maybe they're not style I enjoy fully. They did have copious amounts of interference throughout the weekend because they are part of the Rise faction, which is the leading faction in wXw, with the world champion being Bad Bones, the leader of the group. So I can understand why. They were involved in other things that played into things later on in the weekend, which was interesting. But yeah, this match, Spirit Squad Young Lions, maybe I went 2.25, 2.5 on it. Not utterly bad. It was fine for what it was. Yeah, that's basically it about that. So there's another match I want to talk about on this show, and I really, really enjoyed it. And that was, and I want to hear your thoughts on this team, is A4. So they fought Massive Product in Group A. So they came out as a bit of a comedy one in this one, Dylan. So they came out as Batmandy, so instead of Absolute Andy, and Robin Arnie instead of Marius Alani. So they came out in these white Batman and Robin outfits, playing up to the crowd. I don't know if you had to be there in the audience to kind of get the comedy and the entrances and things. But yeah, apart from that, the actual work of A4, I really, really enjoy them as a team. I think they're fantastic. I think they complement each other really, really well. Absolute Andy is an absolute beast when you see him live. He's a big, big guy. That's why they're putting against a guy like Jörn Simmons. He works well with Rick Camp, with Walter and people like that. He's been around for years in wXw. But as a team, as I said, they're really, really good. I was really enjoyed Absolute Andy, the destruction on David Starr at ringside. He F5'd him into the ring post, into his legs, that made David Starr and extended his selling section outside. And that, brought memories back of Brock Lesnar. I think he did that maybe to Zach Gowen and Rey Mysterio was on a gurney on a board. But yeah, it was really fantastic to see that, and I dig A4 as a tag team.
Yeah, I liked them a lot. Alani, I think, is actually kind of really underrated. He's had some really good matches this year. I think he's one of these guys where if he was doing the exact same thing in the United States or the UK, in the right feds or whatever, he would probably be thought of as one of the best guys on the planet. But it's not that wXw doesn't have any visibility, but it is different, and it's not the same kind of as it would be if you were in a Progress or something like that. But I love this match. I did not know what to expect with the Jörn Simmons and David Starr team. I'm a big fan of David Starr. I like Simmons a lot, but I thought that this could easily be a team that was more about sort of they got a little bit too comedic for my blood, and they really didn't. I thought this was a killer match. The pace of it was insane. They established that the spike pile driver into the Star Tope here, that sort of would be a theme that would last throughout the entire tournament. And I just thought this was really, really, really good. I mean, David Starr, I'm kind of putting the cart before the horse here, but I really feel like he should win 16 Carat this year. And and this was a great performance by him, but I thought everybody in this looked good. I'm a big fan of all four guys. Absolute Andy, you're absolutely right. He's a complete beast. And this was one of those matches where on most shows, I think that this would probably be the clear match of the night. On this show, I think there's a little bit of a debate because of what the main event was, but this was outstanding. I mean, honestly, this and the main event of this show, you could argue, were the two best matches all weekend. I'm not sure that they would be my 1 and 2, but if somebody said they were, I would have no problem with it.
Yeah, I mean, this match, I went 3 3/4 stars on. I really, really enjoyed it. Was in my top 3 matches of the weekend from memory. Like you said, Jörn Simmons can be a bit of a comedic guy sometimes, but it was deadly serious in this. I love a spike pile driver, and Jörn Simmons has got a great pile driver, and as I said, I'm a sucker for spike pile driver. And then it was a fantastic, finishing sequence that led to the victory for Massive Product, Jörn Simmons and David Starr, which would lead into them progressing further in, over the next few days. So yeah, super good match. Next match though, I'll briefly talk about this. We had a singles match, we had a shotgun title match. A shotgun title is very much like the TV title. It's defended a lot on the Shotgun TV show that's out on VOD each week on wXw on demand. And it was Avalanche versus Ivan Kiev. And I want to talk about Avalanche a little bit here, Dylan. I know you've expressed that you enjoy him. He's a great guy to talk to as well, which is really cool. He's got his head screwed on. He loves to kind of get critique. He's not thin-skinned at all. He's happy to listen to people, what their opinions of him are, and you can see he's still improving. I mean, the guy's been working now in WXW for what, five years, maybe 6 years. I'm not too sure, but he's been around. He's tagged with Walter in the past. He's been part of a group called Cerberus, and he's a heel, I would say. Still at this point, but he's working against another heel in Ivan Kiev, who's someone who's part of the Rise faction as well. And I'll be honest, I think he was the worst guy on this show, bar the Spirit Squad for different reasons. I think he was off on certain points. I still think he needs a bit of work, really, but I think it wasn't a bad match by any means. And the match itself led for a kind of set up for what's going to happen later on in the weekend. We had a 4-on-1 beatdown. Rise came down, and then Julian Nero comes down to make the save, and it kind of starts something for tomorrow because Ilya Dragunov's there. He shakes hand with Avalanche. Avalanche snubs it, and it just sets something up maybe for later on, in the weekend. So there's no problem with this match. It told a story. I just think it was slightly disappointing, really. I don't think Ivan Kiev is ready for the position he's been put in.
I agree with that. I also think that there's an issue, like, if I have one criticism of these shows, and I actually understand this, so I'm going to defend it even as I critique it. If I have one criticism of the shows, I would say that having, your so many run-ins and DQs and sort of weird finishes in the singles matches that they tacked in, by the time you get to the end of the tournament, by the time you get to the third day, you actually are almost kind of dreading when Bobby Guns versus Homicide happens, even though it's a relaxed rules match, because you're like, all right, what's going to happen here? Now, in fairness, they were telling a long-term story over the course of the weekend, and I think what they were doing was they were using the opportunity of the tag league, where they have some different tag teams in, maybe they're being exposed to new eyes, to bring people into the bigger stories that they're telling in the promotion. And I think that's actually smart booking. But if you're watching it in sort of a sequence, in a rapid-fire sequence as I did, it did get a little bit tiresome, to be perfectly honest. It just was like, okay, and it took away from my enjoyment a little bit, because it just felt inevitable at times that we were going to get a run-in or a DQ at a critical moment, or something of that nature when you were looking at the non-tournament matches that happen on these shows. Having said that, Avalanche is awesome. Love that dude.
Yeah,
love him.
Yeah,
he looks like a WCW power plant guy, but not in a bad way. It's like if a WCW power plant guy was completely unchained from the shackles of being a WCW power plant guy politically in WCW, and was just like allowed to do all the cool stuff that he does and be a big hoss and do. I mean, he's probably my favorite guy to watch in the company, and he's the guy who I think. And this is not a criticism of Walter, or any of the other hosses. I actually think he's the best hoss in the company, in the sense of being fully invested in being a big man wrestler. Like, that's what his offense is, that's what his character is, that's how he projects. Sometimes Walter, pretty much by virtue of who he is in the company, will have to sell a little bit more for a smaller guy, or he'll have to work a little bit more even. And in an ideal universe, I would like to see him work against a smaller guy. I completely understand it because of his role in the company, but I really appreciate that Avalanche is there to have that more traditional sort of big man approach.
Yeah, it's definitely the traditional big man approach, where he's not going to sell as much. He's more pushed as a monster than Walter is in certain ways. And the one person that Avalanche really looks up to, or has looked up to as a worker, is Bam Bam Bigelow. That's someone, he is his favourite wrestler of all time. So if he can be anywhere near as good as Bam Bam Bigelow, it's going to be fantastic, and he already is. He's really, really fun to watch. So he's another name that people may not be aware of who's listening to this podcast. He's called Avalanche. You know, that name, people may be more used to kind of standardised names now. Mark Briscoe's in this tournament, Timothy Thatcher, John Klinger, he's a champion, but he's also got by the name of Bad Bones. So Avalanche is more of a wrestling name. But no, I don't think that's a problem at all. His name says exactly what he is. He's an Avalanche. He is a big guy. So I don't have a problem with that. And just getting on to your other point about run-ins and stuff, Dylan, are you fair to kind of compare that to, say, other groups that are kind of doing shows, not shows like this, but having talent like this on shows? So, Briscoes and Walter, Timothy Thatcher, they're doing a weekly TV show. They've got to interplay this, not just with straight matches. You've got to have storylines and kind of things, because they have backstage segments taped for the Shotgun TV. And don't you think if they're doing a weekly TV show without this sort of element, it would be very, very dry?
Yeah, I mean, I don't. It's one of those things where I simultaneously didn't. It simultaneously hurt my enjoyment some as a viewer, but I also completely understand it, both from the perspective of a fan watching weekly TV and also from somebody who does do some booking. Because if you're trying to tell long-term stories, you have to utilize and it's like I said, if you're trying to build your brand, you got people who are coming to this event, maybe they came to see the Briscoes, or maybe they're watching on VOD because they want to see the Rottweilers. Well, why wouldn't you try to hook them with a story that's part of what you're doing with your company over in a bigger picture sense, right? Why wouldn't you do that? I mean, it makes sense that you would do that. I don't know in 2017 if a bunch of DQs and run-ins is going to hook a lot of people who are likely to be watching, but maybe. It's certainly possible, especially if people can sort of project what the long-term payoff is. It's a weird one because I understand both sides of it, but I would be being dishonest if I said that it didn't hurt my personal enjoyment, at least to a degree.
No, I think that's fair. And no, that kind of counterpoint is they're trying to serve wXw, and I understand why a lot of masters. So you've got your kind of storyline-driven fans who like that element of things. You've got guys who like the more shoot-style things. That's why I have Ambition. We've got the kind of heavy-hitting matches in this. We've got good work rate in this. So they're trying to tick all those boxes for all different fans. They're trying to appeal to everyone. So I can totally understand why they're doing it. And I have to remember sometimes, I'm not going to like everything. Not everything is aimed at me as a fan. I am a niche of a niche of a niche, just like you, Dylan, as well. So, and I know you understand this completely. I'm not just trying to say this to you like you don't get it, you don't understand it. But I think they are trying to serve a lot of masters, and I don't blame them for doing that.
No. You have to run variety shows, right? Like that is critical. And I think that by and large, my own personal viewing habits aside, nothing that happened on these shows with DQs or run-ins is going to make me less likely to watch wXw. You know what I mean? Like that's. Yeah. There's nothing that happened with that where I'm going to go, I don't want to see it now. If anything, I kind of want to see certain things more because of potential alliances and stuff that were eventually paid off by the time we get to night 3. But it just sort of particularly when you're in that binge watching mode, it does hurt things a little bit. It's like if you're watching a TV show on Netflix and you binge watch it and you see the same trope on 4 consecutive episodes. It gets to a point where you're like, okay, maybe there's a storytelling reason why this is happening, but I wish it wasn't happening in this sequence. Having said that, this main event was great.
Oh yeah, it was. It was really good, really good. Have you seen the Briscoes live before as a team?
I have seen the Briscoes live as a team, although I've actually seen them live in singles more than I've seen them as a team. I've only seen them live in a team setting maybe once or twice, actually. I've mostly seen Jay and Mark working on their own. And I guess we should say the main event was Ringkampf, Timothy Thatcher, and Walter versus the Briscoes, Jay and Mark Briscoe. First of all, the Briscoes even working a date outside of Ring of Honor is huge in 2007. It just almost never happens. Like when I saw they were even on the shows, I was like, holy crap. And this is a legitimate dream match, because if you want to talk about credibility, name 4 guys that are not, in New Japan or WWE who have more credibility when it comes to believability as tough guys or shooters or whatever term you want to use, or just bad dudes in wrestling at this stage than these 4. I mean, you might be able to you throw like a Nick Gage in or somebody like that, or you know what I mean. Like you could cherry pick some guys and kind of throw them into the mix, but by and large, these are the tip-top guys when it comes to having that aura of credibility and intensity and just being badass guys. I mean, these are some of the tip-top guys on the planet in this match. So when this match was announced as the first match on night 1, I think everybody's eyes immediately honed in on this.
Yeah, no, this was an excellent match, and if you're a fan of stiff chops, guys, big stiff lariats kicking each other's heads off, this is the match for you. They went all out here. This wasn't the Briscoes coming in for a payday for a weekend, a nice little trip to Germany to see the sights. This was these guys with the working shoes on, and they wanted to prove something maybe, that they could still work against teams they've never worked against to a high standard. And in this match, they definitely did that. The match itself, I would say this is maybe my second favourite match of the weekend. Just going through all the matches in front of me right now, and this was brilliant. I went 4 stars on this match, Dylan. In the end, we got the Walter and Timothy Thatcher getting the win over the Briscoe brothers. It was quite interesting at the end. There was a little bit of pushing and shoving by the Briscoes afterwards, which made me think maybe something was going to happen later on in the weekend. But as a match to end the show on night 1, I think this was the perfect one.
Oh yeah, this was the main event, and it was a true main event. I mean, it was a dream match, and it was a dream match that was delivered on the first night. And I think that's really important. I promised myself I would not overly compare this to what we do with the Scenic City stuff, but when we had the Scenic City Invitational this year and we had an opportunity to do Darby Allin versus Joey Janela, we kind of knew, even before we knew that Joey Janela was not going to be able to be there for night 2, we knew we had to do that match in the first round. Because sometimes when you have an opportunity to do a dream match and you're booking a tournament, if you project it into the future, first it's a tell of what you're going to do. It's a little bit different when you have a round-robin system like this. But secondly, sometimes you lose a little bit if you don't kick things off with it. And I just thought it was absolutely the right decision to do this on the first day. I thought that was 100% the right move. I saw a handful of people who complained and said they should have done this like later. No, this was the right move to do it on the first night. Huge main event. Felt like a dream match. Not only that, but you kind of get the dream match thing out of the way then, so then people, instead of investing in the idea of dream matches, then they're invested in the tournament. And I think that's really important, is you use the dream match to maximize the value of the tournament. You don't use the tournament to maximize the value of the dream match. That's not how it should work. And this match completely delivered. I mean, I'm not a star rating guy, not that I have anything against it. I just always struggled mentally with how to do that sort of thing because I'm so weird when it comes to that sort of stuff. But this was one of my favorite tag matches of the year, honestly. We'll get to it. I don't want to telegraph anything, but this might have been my favorite match of the weekend. It was 1 or 1A, probably with what is also your number 1. But really, really great match. And I feel like if you're somebody who wants to see wrestling that feels like a fight while also still feeling like sport rather than a brawl, this is the match for you.
Yeah, I think that, for that aspect, heavy hitting, brawling style with these two teams, I think I'd be very shocked if people didn't enjoy this match. Completely believable match. Had me invested throughout. I wasn't sure that Ringkampf would win this, to be honest. I thought potentially the Briscoes would win this and then Ringkampf would have to win the 2 final matches and just squeeze into the finals with how the results played out. But no, they won this one, so it was kind of, to me, clear from this point maybe that Ringkampf are one of those teams that are likely going to reach the finals. So all in all, that was night 1. Slightly mixed bag overall, but I think it's not a thumbs down show from my perspective. I think having the singles matches scattered throughout the show with other guys was important. You could have had 4 tag matches and 1 singles match, and the 4 tag matches go super long. I don't know. But no, I'm glad that they did it and they paced it well. And I think the whole weekend, we'll get to this with our final kind of conclusion at the end of the podcast, but the whole weekend built, and it built fantastically. So this night one, like you said, get this match out of the way so people can then invest and focus on the actual tournament that they've come to see. So we're going on now, a slight change of pace. On the Saturday afternoon, for Carrot, like I mentioned before, they do have the Ambition tournaments. But for the World Tag League, they have the Femme Fatales tournament, which is an 8-woman single elimination tournament done over a very short show. It's done over 2 hours. So on a Saturday afternoon, as I said, so the matches themselves, they've got the sprints. And that's a good thing, because you don't want to burn everybody out with some long women's matches and then you've got another 3.5 hour night 2 to watch afterwards. So I think it was perfectly positioned, and it was quite interesting to see some of the people in this. So just to run them down, we had Tony Storm, Ginny, Viper, Melanie Gray, Kelly, Killer Kelly, Laura DiMatteo, and Vesna as well was the other lady. So we had a buy in one of the rounds due to an injury. So first and foremost, what was your standout? What was your takeaway from Femme Fatale?
This will be a little bit of a hot take, I think, Allan. Hot take warning. Talk about an overused term. In some ways, this was my favorite show of the entire weekend. I'm not saying I think it was the best. Let me make that delineation clear. But what I liked about this was, first of all, it was an extremely brisk show. Like you mentioned, very quick, very easy to digest. Not that any of these shows are long. I don't think. In fact, I watched all these on wXw now. I don't think there's a single one of these that's over 2.5 hours as a video. Like, I think they're all under the 2.5 hours mark. So none of these are long. They're not super lengthy investments, and they're all worth watching. But I enjoyed how brisk it was. I enjoyed the different personalities that were in play in this tournament. I think you had some real clear delineation stylistically and in terms of how people wrestle and even what they represent aesthetically, which I really liked. And I thought the commentary on this was great. I mean, like, this was, unfortunately, the last show I got to listen to the English commentary for, because the English commentary was not quite up yet for night 2 or night 3, and we wanted to have this podcast done, relatively early because I have a big weekend this weekend. But I really enjoyed the commentary on this. I think Allan's commentary on this was really, really good, just in sort of giving the back history of some of the women and having a real enthusiasm for women's wrestling. Lots of times when you have guys on commentary, it feels like when they're calling women's matches, you can almost feel the internalized misogyny creep out in terms of how they talk about stuff. And I'm not even talking about sexualizing things. I'm talking about how they treat the talent. There was none of that here. So I thought the commentary did an excellent job, which really enhanced it for me. The other thing was no match overstayed its welcome. Now, you could argue that maybe some of the matches could have been a hair longer, because I don't think a single match went even 10 minutes. But I liked the idea that here in the middle of this bigger tournament, you had this brisk tournament with these different personalities where everything just went by super quickly, and it kind of gave the feel that every match had a sort of go for broke quality to it, which is also something that I feel like you see on those Ambition shows, I might add, where it's like, okay, I've got to end this quick, and I like that. So I was really, really high on this show, probably absurdly high. I don't know how you felt about it. I don't know if you want to break down individual matches or not, but I was really high on this show.
Yeah, I mean, the show had a purpose, the tournament, because it was announced by Christian Jacoby that the winner would get a title shot at a show, Back to the Roots, which is one of their bigger shows in January of next year. So there's a purpose for this. So it wasn't just a case of let's have a tournament for the sake of having a tournament just to fill some time. It's actually going to lead to something which was cool. And the other thing I like, they had a proper trophy for the tournament. They came out before the start of it, and I like that traditional sense. And they did this for the start of the actual World Tag League itself. They bring all the teams out, have the photos on the stage or in the ring with Christian, who's the head of wXw, with a trophy. And I'm a sucker for trophies in wrestling, so I was a big fan of that. So in the actual matches themselves, I mean, the performer, I mean, for me, and a lot of people said this, that has really stood out, was the lady who I had no knowledge of going in. I mean, people touted her as someone that's really well regarded in Germany, and that was Wesner. You know, I thought she was excellent.
Oh yeah, Vesna was great. She was absolutely tremendous. She brought something totally different to the field than anybody else, which again, that's one of the things I liked about this a lot. Her match with Toni Storm was really good. Probably the match of the tournament. Although I did think the final with Toni Storm and Viper was excellent too. So I could really go either way on that. But yeah, she added something totally different. Commentary putting over the fact that she was thought of as one of the best wrestlers in Germany, period, not just, women's wrestling. I thought that was a nice touch. She had a aura of credibility to her and intent, and you really were wondering, how's Toni going to overcome her? And, I mean, I knew Storm was going to win because I'd seen the spoiler, but as I was watching it, it was still like, okay, how is she going to get past this? And sometimes that's difficult to do when you know what's going to happen. But they executed things so well that I really was invested in it. I mean, I actually thought everybody looked good in this tournament, though. I thought Melanie Gray looked good. I thought Jenny looked amazing. I'm a huge Jenny fan. She wrestled Toni Storm in the opener. Laura Di Matteo and Killer Kelly was like my kind of sleeper match of the weekend that probably nobody will talk about. Maybe like that Rafa match was for you. Like, I thought that the recklessness and intensity on display of that match was incredible. Like, it just came across like two people who were willing to kill each other to get to the next round. And one thing that they really succeeded at, I think, Allan, is they made the final seem like a big deal. And I had wondered if that would be possible, because when you have a bigger tournament that this is sort of embedded within, and this is a one-day thing, and that's a 3-day thing, and there's not as many people in attendance for this because of when it's happening and whatnot, it's like, I had wondered, okay, is that main event really going to feel like a big deal, or is it just going to feel like, okay, whatever, that's the final of a nifty little side thing? No, it felt like a big deal. When the near falls and the build and everything, when Toni Storm eventually defeats Viper, it felt like a big match and a big moment. And to me, that's huge.
No, I think all in all, the person that stood out to me the most in this tournament was Killer Kelly. Not because she was polished by any means, but for me, for someone relatively inexperienced like she was, she carried herself like a star. And that's such a big thing. You can't, really teach that. That comes from experience, or that comes from something you've already got. And I think she carried herself well, and she showed real fire in a match. And I'm always a sucker for someone doing that, showing a lot of fire in a match, as a babyface. And that really, really stood out to me as a performance. So, all in all, I really enjoyed the show. I didn't watch this show from a live perspective as closely, and that is only because I had a couple of friends come in while the show started who I'd not seen, I wanted to meet and have a chat to. So I did watch the show from the floor rather than from the balcony. But everything I did see, I enjoyed. I enjoy seeing Toni Storm, I enjoy seeing Viper. They're the kind of the names, on a tournament that you would expect. But seeing everyone, there wasn't anyone that was completely horrific. I think, some of the women still need some seasoning, still need, to improve a little bit. But that's no slight on them. These are the type of shows you're going to get them to get that experience, to have this exposure. So no problem about with the show at all. There's one thing I wanted to ask you, because there's a bit of uproar on this the other week, Dylan. We had a women's show. I believe Progress ran a women's show. Did you hear about this?
I did not.
I think it was Progress. I might be wrong on getting someone's going to shout at me, but there was a women's show there a couple of weeks ago, and what they had before the main event was a male match, and that caused quite a lot of uproar because it was a female show and it was taken away from the female performers with some of the comments. Well, we had the same thing here. We had, before the main event, which was the final, Viper versus Toni Storm, we had Jackson Stone versus Dirty Dragon come out. And I had no problem with having a match like that before, the finals. You've got to have something You know, in a tournament setting, a lady can't win a match and then just stay there and wait for the next person to come out. You've got to give them a few minutes, you know, to breathe. And, you know, yeah, they could have had 2 other females on there. Maybe they could have done, I don't know. But I had no problem having a male match on a female tournament show.
Let me give you a little bit of insight on this from my perspective. Like, here's the thing. I can understand the idea of just having all women on this show, and I can even understand why it would be upsetting to some people. I really can. I don't think it's an outrageous thing to be upset by. However, to me, what's more important is that you give something is there as a bridge, so that the final can, frankly, so that it can be called, so that the 2 women can get together and call a compelling match. Because the reality is that's probably what was going on. And I don't, you know, you have to have something that bridges from point A to point B. Now, could you have done, you know, a couple of women trainees maybe that weren't? Sure, you could. But the problem is, then the question becomes, well, why didn't Vesna have an opponent? You could have just thrown one. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. There's a logic flaw there that is difficult to sort of integrate with the bigger story because Vesna had a first round bye. So it's difficult to. To me, I would struggle to criticize them greatly for that. I understand why it might be a little bit annoying to some people, but I don't think it's a major issue. I think. It would be a bigger issue if, like, you put out 2 huge male names and had them go 20 minutes or something. You know what I mean? Like, okay, fine. But that's not what we're talking about here, you know. So, to me, it's not a major issue. One final thing before we move on to night 2 proper of the tournament is, I will say that I thought overall that Toni Storm looked better here than she did in the Mae Young Classic. And I've not been high on her. Not that I'm anti-Toni Storm, but I've just always sort of been like, she's fine. This was the first time where I really thought, she's a really good wrestler. So this tournament also sort of served to win me over regarding Toni Storm as well.
No, I am exactly the same. I was quite vocal up until I saw some of her stuff on Stardom that I thought she absolutely sucked. I saw her in 2015 at a PCW show against Viper, and my comment was, Viper was the wrestler in this, Toni Storm just doesn't belong whatsoever. And I was brutally honest about that, and I'm still going to defend that. I don't think she was at the time. But from that point then, two and a half years ago to now, the improvement is just huge. And I think that some of that's got to be down to working these tours for Stardom. You're working, 3, 4, 5 days in a row, gets all these, super talented women. She's worked against in the last 2.5 years. And she's just improved a hell of a lot. So I've turned the corner on her from a live perspective. I know she was a lot better than when I saw her due to me being exposed to some of her Stardom work. But no, she's really good and she belongs, and she carries another person that carries herself like a star. And that's huge. And I think we're going to see her in the next few years. I wouldn't be shocked if the WWE make a play for her in the next 18 months. So
yeah, I think
what
that's
we'll do now is... Yeah, no, I agree. So we're just going to move to night 2 of the tournament now. This is a Saturday show, and this is just to comment on the pacing of the shows again, Dylan. So on night 1, the main event was this dream match. Let's get that out of the way. Night 2, again, we have a main event with purpose, and this is the Ilya Dragunov going after Bad Bones for the title. If people don't know, Ilya Dragunov beat Walter at 16 carat, the final, win what I would say is the greatest match I've ever seen live. It was so phenomenal. Absolutely amazing. So he gets a title shot. So he gets Bad Bones, who's had the title with Rise for the last 2 months. And so this main event, we'll get to it in a minute, but I think it was important that you had another focus on the show, and you don't want the focus to be 3 nights of the Tag League every single night as the main event. So I think this is a nice change of pace, and I think, again, this is just building. Again, we're building the shows one after another, and I think great booking, great pacing, and I totally think it was a good idea to have this match in that position.
Well, the other thing is, too, if we're being completely honest, the alternative would have been to put Ring Kampf in the main event spot again.
I think if we're just being honest, that would have been the alternative, and I think that would have been a big mistake. So you know what I mean? You don't want to oversell your hand when it comes to that. And the reality is there's no other match that was on night 2 that could have possibly main evented, at least as part of the tournament, other than Ringkampf and the Rottweilers. That was the only one that could have. So you kind of they were sort of in a position where they had to do this, just for the sake of giving fans something different. Dragunov is like a god there, or that's how he comes across on tape. I mean, we can get into that sequentially, but yes, this match I actually thought was quite good up until the way it ended, but. And I agree with you. I feel like normally my instinct would be to put a tournament match on last. That would be my instinct. Just like normally I would say if you're running a promotion and you have a world title match, you put the world title match on that last. Well, this is a case where you kind of have two things that are in conflict with each other. And the world title match went last, and I think you have a compelling kayfabe reason for that with it being a world title match. And I also think you have a logical booking reason for it, which is that you don't want Ringkampf to main event both of the first 2 shows because it really tips your hand. So I thought it was smart.
Yeah. So we opened up with Briscoe Brothers against EYFBO. The crowd from the get-go were hot. I think the Saturday shows are the most well-attended shows for whatever reason. People are off on Saturday, they can make their way to the shows earlier. They don't want to... Potentially, I know the Sunday shows, you're going to get the finality, you're going to find out what's happened throughout the tournament, but people may have to go to work the next day and they can't travel. So the Saturday shows, traditionally, from what I've been led to believe, and this was the case with Carrot as well, is the best attended show. So the crowd was the hottest of the weekend, and that really helped. The first match was Briscoe's EYFBO. Again, we've talked about both teams already now. Both put great performances in. We're seeing things like springboard doomsday devices to win that match by the Briscoes. So we were seeing 450s, all sorts of different things throughout this match. So that match was a great hot opener to get the crowd going for the rest of the show.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, it's a shame what would happen with the Rottweilers because the Briscoes it was really cool to see the Briscoes get to wrestle teams that they otherwise would never get to wrestle anywhere else. And I think the capstone on that would have been potentially the Rottweilers match that we wouldn't get, which we'll obviously eventually talk about. But I really like this as an opener. I thought this was really probably even better than the opener from night 1, and I was pretty darn high on that one.
Yeah, so it was very, very good match. So I do again. That's the type of match that will get lost in a weekend like this. But I think it's well worth checking out if you're dipping in and just taking certain matches out. Definitely check that one. So then after that we had another shotgun title match. We still had Ivan Kiev as the champion. Did a 4-way Avalanche, Bobby Guns and Alexander James. I really loved Avalanche doing the double Samoan job, getting 2 guys on his shoulders and doing that. That was really cool to see. Lots of kind of everyone powdering out. My only issue with this match was it was one of those matches where it looked like people were waiting their turns a little bit. But then at the end, it finished off well. Wasn't a bad match at all. Had its place on the show. Have you got any comments at all about the shotgun match, Dylan?
It was the only match of the weekend where I felt like it probably wasn't necessary. However, it didn't feel unnecessary either, if that makes sense. If I was laying the show out, I don't know if I would have done it. Having said that, you get some of your regulars on, you get them exposed to a bigger audience, so I get it, and I was fine with it.
And then after that we had Ginny versus Kelly. So Ginny's someone who works in the UK for Progress primarily, and Kelly is Killer Kelly, who we spoke about earlier. This match was basically going to be a women's championship tournament match, because at the moment they're running a championship tournament to crown the first wXw Women's Champion. Tony Storm's going to get the shot against whoever is the champion in January. We have to crown that champion first. So they're doing a tournament throughout shows. It was originally supposed to be Ginny versus Melanie Gray, who is someone who's much beloved in wXw, but she was injured. So Ginny came out and just said, yeah, she's not wrestling against me because she's shit. Because she has this, Ginny's got this kind of bitch attitude. So she has this match against Kelly instead. And I think It was a decent match. My worry, however, when I've seen Ginny before, is how tiny she is. She looks like she could break in half at any point, and I'm worried for taking bumps. But no, she's fine, really. I always just think, oh my God, there's an injury around the corner. She's very, 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 very slight, very much like Sasha Banks in a way.
Yeah, here's the thing. I actually think that plays to her advantage as a character. Allan talked about this some on commentary. By the way, I should note that I really enjoy Rico and Jeremy on commentary too. I don't want to undersell anybody, but he talked about, like, and I thought it was a good observation, that she kind of uses that to her advantage. Like, she can move around the ring maybe in slightly different ways than other people do. She's got pointier elbows and knees. I think that was kind of the point that Allan, which I thought was smart. I mean, that's a smart thing for a commentator to say. And I actually think it comes across. Her forearm strikes look brutal for somebody who's as small as she is. Like, she's got better forearms than like 95% of people who have gimmicks where they're supposed to be tough. And I just, I really enjoy her as a character. She's somebody that I actually really wish was in the WWE, because I think that character could be tremendous in that setting. Not that I don't enjoy her on the indies, but I really enjoyed this match for what it was on the show. I thought it was perfectly placed, and I thought it was a nice little addition to have on the show that gave you a look at some different wrestlers.
Yeah, I think that's fair there to have them on the show in this position, and it's telling an overall story of the promotion. We've still got a women's title tournament, so you're not going to not have a match on one of the nights at least. So I was pleased that we didn't have women's matches on all 3 nights plus the women's tournament. Might have been overkill, I don't know. People are going to disagree with me, that's their take. But yeah, I think this was perfectly placed for what it was. So I don't want to go through every match one by one, because we're going to be here for another hour and a half if that was the case. So just talk to me then. We may as well talk about the 2 other matches on this show that we're talking about from being the best matches on the show. Not that all of them aren't worth talking about, but just from a time perspective. So that was the Rottweilers versus Ringkampf. And that match was a hell of a match, wasn't it, Dylan? I think Walter was murdering both guys with chops. And I think Walter's got some of, if not the stiffest chops in wrestling. They're brutal from a live perspective.
Oh yeah. I mean, I've never seen him live. I hope to very soon. But that he's such an imposing force. And one of the cool things I think about this match, though, was seeing, in theory, Low-Ki and Homicide should look visually. They should look not intimidating against Walter, but they carry themselves so well that I had zero problem believing that they could beat somebody's ass, and I think that is a really undersold element of those guys in general. This was a really good match, great stretch run. Thatcher, I thought, was real smart and real creative throughout this tournament. He gets, for so long, up until maybe the last, 9 or 10 months, he's been criticized so much for being a boring wrestler. Well, if you go watch this tournament and still think Timothy Thatcher's boring, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, his performance, both whenever he would be almost working a face in peril role, or when he was working on top, or like when the pace was required to pick up, was absolutely excellent. I thought all these 4 guys complemented each other very well. This is probably my favorite individual Homicide performance of the year. I've actually seen him a good bit because he's wrestled in Atlanta Wrestling Entertainment some, and I've seen some other places. This was probably my favorite individual performance of his. Not even that he was really the standout, because he wasn't, but it felt the closest to me to the Homicide of old, of any match that I've seen him have in 2017.
Yeah, I think he was tested in this match by Ringkampf, and he was going to sink or swim, and he did pass it with flying colours. I love the brawling in this, Dylan. I think it wasn't brawling for the sake of brawling, I felt. I think it was really hard hitting at ringside. They both split off at separate sides of the Turbine Hall. You had, I think it was Walter and Low-Ki at one side and Homicide and Thatcher on the other, and it was just awesome from the vantage point I had, which was the balcony. I had a great view of this. I was seeing, chairs flying everywhere, people running away. it just had everything from a brawl. It just felt violent, and it felt like two teams that were just throwing everything at each other to get the win. And I'm not a huge fan of apron spots, but I saw Loki get powerbombed by Walter on the apron, and that was brutal. He didn't take it on his back; he just basically took it on his ass.
Yes,
it still was super effective.
His selling of that on the video was excellent because you're right. He didn't take it like on the spine like a lot of guys do. He took it very, very basically on his ass, like you said, and it's one of those things where if you don't sell that right, it doesn't work. But his selling of it was so good that you didn't even hardly really notice that he took it in a way that was theoretically less painful. I really liked this match quite a bit. I thought this was basically a home run performance by all parties, and the other two tags on the show, we don't have to run them down. I thought they were fine for what they were. I didn't, I was, to me, the other big real story from the tag league perspective for the rest of the show is that Massive Product wins again, so they're, churning along at 2-0 going into night 3.
Yeah, I think the one thing about that match against the Spirit Squad was, I for a split second I thought Jens Simon was legitimately pissed off with the Spirit Squad, especially Kenny Dykstra. But it was all then a ploy just to get a table came into the ring. They had an arm wrestling match during the wrestling match. The referee let that go, and then the table left, and they continued wrestling. So I think that was a slightly different thing to see. I had no problem with it, and obviously Massive Product telling the story, that they're destined for the finals. So yeah, it was obvious they were going to beat the Spirit Squad in this. So that led to the final, the main event, which was Ilya Dragunov versus Bad Bones John Klinger. And what's your exposure to Bad Bones outside of this weekend?
I've seen a fair amount of his just watching random wXw shows, on High Spots and other things. So I was familiar with him. I made a joke the other day that he kind of, he looks like Luke Gallows and like a leather daddy had a baby or something. Like he's a very interesting look as a wrestler. But he's an interesting choice as a world champion for me. I personally don't know if he works for me in that role, but he seems to work, at least on a cursory view, with the wXw audience, which is really all that matters. And I think he is an interesting sort of foil for the other talents that are rotating around him in the company. And, I will say that I thought this was a very good match. I mean, there's some no-selling sort of stuff of high-impact moves that I'm never going to completely love. But Dragunov is one of those guys. Kurt Stallion would be another, that they're so fiery and they have such a unique sort of simultaneously being tough guys and also being underdogs, which is very hard to do, almost impossible actually, that it bothers me less with them than it does with other people. And I know that could be seen as hypocrisy. It's just the degree of fire that they show and the way it sort of fits with their character. At an elemental level, it works for me more than it does when it just feels like guys who are doing it because they saw it on a tape and they know it will get a cheap pop.
Yeah, I think they really are two of the fieriest wrestlers in the world at the moment. Dragunov, I've got no. I'm going to run out of superlatives to describe the man. He is amazing. He should be getting booked everywhere. That guy just will go, and then keep going. He will take punishment after punishment. You will root for the guy. He will cut promos. You won't understand what he's saying in German, but you still are drawn to those promos just by his delivery. The guy's got something special. I was led to believe, and I thought this was a bit of kayfabe, just to build up his character and his persona and his auras. He gets really kind of in the mood backstage. He will be there getting shouting, banging his head against things, but that's all a shoot. Apparently he treats it that seriously. It takes him an hour or two to get into that character, to be that fired up, that ready for the matches, and then at the end it's just like a mental dump. After a match he'll collapse, he will just, it's just so much. But this guy, I've never seen anyone like him to a degree, and for me to have never seen a guy, and then fully, and then watching against Walter and have a 5-star match that I've seen live, and I've never seen a match of that calibre, and I've seen a hell of a lot of matches live with a hell of a lot of talent, even talking about your Misawas and Kobashis and guys of that nature. This guy is something special. I'm going to sing this guy's kind of talents from the rooftop to anyone who will listen. I did this at Carrot, and I'll do this again. Ilya Dragunov is, and this may be a hot statement, a hot take to people, but he is one of the top 5 wrestlers in the world at the moment.
I don't know if I would go that high, but I also don't have any aversion to that statement. I don't. He's a guy, I want to see him wrestle. Well, to me, the dream match for him is Kurt Stallion, because Kurt Stallion to me is like the U.S. version of him in some ways, but without, as much of a promotional machine behind him. But I want to see the guy everywhere. Look, if money was no object, if I was independently wealthy, I would book him on the shows that I help with tomorrow. He is an absolute top flight talent. Every absolute top flight, 100%. A lot of what I see in Pete Dunne in terms of just having that organic ability to get over by virtue of personality, I also see in him. And he should be a huge, huge star in wrestling, and hopefully will be a huge, huge star. Not that it's anything to sneeze at to be a huge star in WXW. As we mentioned, as you pointed out the other day on Twitter, and I'm stealing from you, Allan. This is a promotion that's going to have run 81 shows by the end of the year, so that's nothing to sneeze at. But there's definitely a lot of growth on the table for him.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see. Hopefully he'll pick up more and more bookings now. I think he's someone who people do need to take the time and go and check out. So anyone who's listening to this, please, if you've not seen him, check him out, even if it's just checking out some stuff on YouTube. He's got something special, but nothing to take away from Bad Bones. Bad Bones is a good wrestler that's actually got very good in the last 6 months. I know certain pockets of the wXw crowd aren't fans of his. He's been around for a long time. I know Strigger of Cage Match fame, cagematch.de fame, he's a guy who's been quite vocally against Bad Bones, but I think to be the face of the promotion as the champion, he looks the part, he carries himself well, he can go in the ring, he's got some cool moves as well that you wouldn't expect someone like that to bust out. I think he's in a good position, and I have no problem with him being the champion. I mean, he's had the title for 2 months. So just to kind of get to the end of this match, so at the end it was a case of we had all Rise come out, they got sent to the back, and then we had one of Rise come out near the end. I think it was Pete Bouncer. He's the kind of minion of the team, the guy that gets bullied a little bit by others. So I thought when he came out, this is it, Ilya could win this. He may turn on Bad Bones and get Ilya to win the title, but that wasn't the case. It was actually Damac who came down and turned heel. He was the one that he hit Bad Bones. And I didn't understand why he did that. I mean, you wouldn't know if you had this explained to you as well, but we fed this back to wXw, and they took the feedback in the second night, and in the third night they explained things in both German and English. So I think the kind of storyline reason was, if Bad Bones could lose the title if he got disqualified. So the whole idea was him to come out, attack Bad Bones, so Ilya would get disqualified, and then turn heel. So it made complete sense, but to me at the time I didn't quite understand why, but when it was announced or explained to me, it made complete sense. But I think if they explained that over the house mic in English, I would have got that straight away.
Yeah, that was definitely the most confusing booking, decision that we saw. It makes perfect sense when it's explained that way, or at least it makes as much sense as it can make, right? I suppose you could argue that Damac didn't actually have to hit him with the belt, but I think that's still a little bit too far down the Russo rabbit hole for my personal blood. But I get, with the benefit of a bigger explanation, there's certainly enough logic there where it's not as confounding as it may have originally appeared.
No, I mean, a lot of people who I spoke to after the show understood why this booking decision was made. So do I. Don't get me wrong, I want to see Ilya win the title. There's that thing in wrestling, Dylan, that, you know, and it's a fine art to know when to exactly pull the trigger. And my worry is, if we continue this the path with Ilya for the next 5-6 months, he eventually wins a title at Carrot, he has a title match in March, that might be too long. The story from him winning it to the next year, I don't know. That's my worry. Maybe this was the right moment, the crowd were hot for it, the crowd were ready for it, or they may have known this and they're going to wait a little bit, and then when they do actually pull the trigger, it's going to mean even more than it does now.
It's a very tough decision, because on the one hand, I could see the mentality being, we don't want to overwhelm the tournament, right? You don't want something to be second. Like, one of the reasons, again, I'll make the SCI comparison again because it's what I know. We had Tank retire this year, who's a local legend and very well known outside of just the Chattanooga area, against Matt Riddle in the first round. That had to be a first round match to us because we did not want to overwhelm the story of the rest of the tournament in the final. So yeah, it was in the main event on night one, but you don't want that to be, you don't want the last thing in the final to be a guy retiring, right? Like it's a tough choice. You have to sort of serve both masters again, right? So I get it. I get maybe why there would be fear about doing it for that reason, because you don't want to overwhelm the tournament and create a story that's more important than the reason you're there in the first place. I think that's a very fair potential reason why you wouldn't do it. I also understand the issue of waiting too long. I mean, to be really candid about it, there were a lot of people who watched the Scenic City Invitational last year who felt Anthony Henry should have won last year. And this year going in, it's like we knew all along Matt Riddle was going to win. That was always going to be our pick. We had a lot of reasons for it. This is not the podcast to go into it. But, some people could make, I think, a fair point that maybe we waited too long with Anthony. Maybe he should have won last year. He didn't. Gunnar Miller won last year. Ultimately, I'm fine with it. I think it worked out, and everybody has been very high on the show, so I don't get mentally lost in the weeds of whether or not that was or was not the right thing. But I understand that argument, and I think it's enhanced a little bit more when you're talking about your world title, though, than just a tournament proper, because that is such a big thing, and we've seen so many guys in wrestling history where a company waited too long and it just didn't work, or it didn't work the way it should have. So that could be something to worry about. I don't know. I have to assume he's going to win it at Carrot, but again, you have the issue of, does that overwhelm the tournament? So it's tough to say.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, seeing where they're going to go with this. But if there's any promotions that I do trust with the booking, wXw is one of them. So fingers crossed it's just me being overcautious and, be tainted by, other promotions and them not being able to figure out when to pull the trigger correctly. And wXw might pull this off perfectly and I've got nothing to worry about. But the one thing I loved about this was at the end, the fans got sent home happy because we had a bit of a team joining up against Cerberus. So that was Julian Nero, Avalanche and Ilya Dragunov. I think that was pretty cool to kind of give them that at the end to send the crowd happy. And earlier at the end, he kind of walked off right at the end. He cut a promo apologising for not winning the title. But we saw those three guys together, and that was quite exciting because we didn't know if they'd officially reformed at that point or not. And I didn't understand this because I didn't really follow wXw closely until this year. But Cerberus were massively over until they split. And when these guys were all together again, it's a huge deal for those fans, that crowd, and that's something I want to discuss about night 3. So we'll go on to night 3 now, just to wrap up the podcast, Dylan. So in this, we opened it up with Spirit Squad versus A4, and I thought going in, it's going to be a victory for A4. That's going to be quite interesting. Let's see how that plays into the actual overall tournament. But I've never ever experienced anything quite like this, Dylan, where there was a heel turn. And it was completely unexpected. It sucked the life out of the audience. The air left the room. It was like people were distraught that this could happen. And that was Absolute Andy turned on his tag team partner, Marius Alani, and hit him with a really stiff super kick, really to put the point home. And wow, it was just like, I just didn't expect that. And that gave Spirit Squad the 3 points. So they're, jumping in, they've won, they've got some points. And wow, it just was a really effective heel turn.
Yeah, I mean, I wondered how it came across in the building because watching on tape, it was almost jarring in a bad way for me. It was like, well, damn, I was really into A4, and now they're not a team. So, and look, that's kind of the point because you want your heel turn to have that emotional impact. So from that perspective, it worked. It also kind of sucked a little bit for me because I was like, damn it, I like this team. And the Spirit Squad sort of getting to troll and get a troll victory on the way out with how they were interacting with that crowd all week made a lot of sense. I guess we should note real quick that the Rottweilers were unable to wrestle on this show due to an injury to Loki on night 2. But yeah, I thought this was a solid heel turn sort of thing. It wasn't, to me, it was the worst opener of the 3 nights. In the sense that, yeah, the heel turn was there, but it didn't. The match itself was just kind of there to me. First of all, it was over before it could really get into a major gear. But I do think it was an interesting sort of thing to do. A lot of turns and whatnot on these shows. Like a lot of sort of stuff like that. Now, and I'm not even saying that as a criticism. It's just there was a lot of storytelling on these shows, both within and outside of the tournament.
No, I definitely agree. There is storytelling, and I think this may be one of those points of me watching it live versus you watching it on VOD, where certain things are lost. But from a live perspective, this was really, really effective. I could see Andy being really, really booed as a heel, really, really over as a heel. And the interesting thing was, just after because I had to tweet or I had to do Periscope where I would type out, who's coming out and then record it and then type out who's won. I'd always try and predict who's won. So as soon as the bell rang, it would say such and such beat such and such. I'd hit record, bang, it's up there. So, people could watch it. And I was just about to kind of, at A4 there, it was all typed out. It was pretty confident that they were going to beat the Spirit Squad here. And then I was going to put after this, A4, one of the most underrated tag teams in the world. I really will hope they get bookings elsewhere. And then this happened. And I was like, oh man, I'm really sad now that this team are going to split up because I would love to see more eyes on them, different matchups that they could have. But I was mad as well in a little bit of a way that Andy, turned on him myself. I was, damn it, I'm not going to get these matches against other teams now. So I think it was completely effective. I say that's one of the most memorable points for me of the whole weekend. From a live perspective, it was really, really memorable and really, effective. So thumbs up for doing that. And then Spirit Squad getting the troll victory. Big fan of things like that as well. So, kind of just going over the rest of the show. What stands out for you apart from the main event?
Well, I think one thing that does sort of stand out is that, first of all, Massive Product had utilized that spike pile driver with the tope combo from David Starr, where he'd hit the spike pile driver and then dive out after. They'd really utilized that across the board in the tournament. I believe they did it here against the Young Lions, too, if I'm not mistaken, where they won that match. And that, of course, would play into the final. So I think that's a good thing to think about when you're watching these shows, is the usage of big moves and spots and how they're sort of developed across the tournament. That is something that is super underrated. It's something that, when I'm involved in trying to help with a show, that's something that I always think about is there a way we can tell a story even with a single spot throughout the course of a tournament? That was one of my favorite things in the entire tournament is how that was utilized. So that kind of stood out to me. I thought, Ring Conf and EYFBO was another good showing by EYFBO. They got the please come back chant or whatever afterward. It felt organic. It didn't feel canned. It didn't feel absurd. It felt completely fitting for their level of performance. So I was really excited for that. Of course, Ring Conf did win, which was no real surprise. I think if I have one criticism of this tournament, I would probably say that by the end of night 2, I personally felt like it was pretty obvious that we were going to get Ring Comp versus Massive Product as the final. Now, you could say that the Rottweiler's injury, that really is the moment when it became obvious that before that point it may not, and that's fair enough. But I felt to me, it was a little bit telegraphed. But then again, sometimes telegraphing things is okay. Sometimes telling the story that makes the most sense and is the most logical is not a flaw. It's actually smart booking. And I think this is probably one of those cases too, and we can get to that when we talk to the final about the final itself. I did enjoy the Cerberus Rise match for what it was, although it didn't blow me away. And I thought Bobby Guns and Homicide had a fun little brawl. You know, Night 3 to me was kind of like a show where it felt like they had a bunch of different stories that they had started over the course of the tournament, both internally to the tournament and externally to the tournament. And they wanted to get a little bit of all of them on the show. And I felt like they largely succeeded with that. In some ways, I thought it was the weakest show of the three, but not in the sense, I didn't think it was bad. I just felt like the other shows had first of all, they didn't have anything to overcome as much as losing the Rottweilers. You know, that was a blow. And I also think the other two shows had much better openers from an action standpoint, even though that turn was effective as we outlined. So that's the case. But one thing I will say for this third show, and this can kind of bridge into us talking about the final, or if you want to go over some of your other thoughts, that's fine as well, Allan. But one thing I will say about it is it was a show that was about the main event, and I love that in a tournament. I love in a tournament and in a big match and a big show where you're able to make the big show about the main event. Not that the undercard doesn't matter, not that nothing else on the show was good. That is not what I'm saying at all. But this show was about ring comp versus massive product.
Yeah, completely agree. That's what it built to, and it's like a crescendo. But just a few brief thoughts before we get to that match was, I'd heard about Cerberus, I'd heard they were fantastic, I'd heard the theme music was fantastic and it just fit them, but I didn't expect what was to come, which was, you know, it was an impromptu match. We had Bad Bones come out, he's there with the Mac, the new recruits for Rise, they've turned heel, and then all of a sudden Cerberus's music hit. And this music is music that's available, it's on public domain, it's not copyrighted music. So I'm not sure why they don't utilise this in the actual overall show production, because they can do from a legal perspective. But they're live, the pop was huge. It was like, but you know, trying to think of a good example. We have guys that have split off and gone away from it. I'll tell you one, it's not the best example, but it's one that's topical, is The Shield.
Sure.
So you had three guys all split away from each other, and then they all come together, and bang, that you try and reignite that lightning in the bottle again. But with Cerberus on this night, it hit everything. The crowd, like I said, the pop was huge. The music hit. They had this, really fun match, I thought, because it was, all about, the Mac turned heel, and Allan trying to get his hands on him, and Dirty Dragon was involved as well. Who's a guy we've not really talked about, who's entertaining as hell in small portions, and I think he was associated with Cerberus here. I don't know if he's got a history with him or he's part of them. I'm not too sure. My understanding was at this point it was dragging off Avalanche and Julian Nero. So I'm sorry if I'm wrong. He may be part of Cerberus as well, but my understanding is Cerberus, the meaning is a three-headed dog from hell. So that would fit the three guys I mentioned. But yeah, no, this was a really fun match, and it showed that Rise aren't going to rush it over everyone. Cerberus are back. They can stand up to Rise. So that's going to be interesting how that can play into the storylines in the next few months. So as well, because we didn't have anything to do with the Rottweilers, we had the Briscoe brothers. They worked against JFK. Well, we've not talked about them. That's Jay Skillett and Francis Caspin. They're a youngish team. Francis Caspin's been around for a little bit of time. I think he was touted as the main kind of guy from the academy last year. And Jay Skillett is a guy who's not had a huge amount of matches, but I don't think they're out of place as a team. They're very much a traditional babyface tag team. It was good experience letting them work against the Briscoes, so I think it was a good idea, having this match. It wasn't blow away by any means, but I think JFK are going to get a lot from, the loss itself. I was quite sceptical that I thought, should they have got the rub against Briscoes, because Briscoes at the end of the day had nothing. It wouldn't matter if they lost, it wouldn't affect them, they're still going to be as over, but if JFK won, it would really, really ignite them as a tag team in wXw. So I don't know what your thoughts on kind of that kind of style of booking, pushing a team that, is always going to be over, and getting the win versus a team that could, maybe deserve that win or help them by getting that win.
Had they actually been in the tournament as a sort of wild card dark horse team, I actually probably would agree with the idea of putting them over. As a tack-in here that sort of came out as an open challenge when Jay said they were there for a fight, I actually think they gained more from losing. This is a situation where I think if they do win, it just comes across as, oh, you're just letting your boys win, because it doesn't have the impact, because it almost comes across like charity, frankly. And I don't think at the end of the day they probably gain more from just being in there and answering a Briscoe's Open challenge than they would have from winning in a way where I think a lot of people would have just read it as a charity case booking, rightly or wrongly. I just think I know that's a perception that sometimes happens when you do things like that. One other thing I do want to mention real quick about Cerberus is that Avalanche and Dragunov have been at each other's throats for a big chunk of the year. So them coming together also sort of has a cool dynamic with that, where it's like, all right, we're putting aside our issues because we have bigger problems now, and I do think that's sort of a cool theme to play with.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that was pretty cool, and they may revisit that in the future, or still be in Cerberus but still have that feud as well. So that time will tell. And then we had the Bobby Guns Homicide match, was the relaxed rules match, which was a good match to have before the main event. We had Homicide channeling his inner Abdullah the Butcher by digging out a fork and using that on Bobby Guns. We had to, at the end, we actually saw a cop killer after the show, or after the match. I think Homicide in a singles match, I think this was best served him having this kind of no DQ match where there could be a bit of brawling. I think in a straight match, I don't know if he'd have struggled with a guy against Bobby Guns. So I think this was perfect for where it was positioned on the show.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a nice, different thing to do. If you look at these shows, one of the real things you can say is that they put sort of different little extra matches on the shows. And I thought this was a nice one to have to sort of bridge, and also a good, kind of some smart goodwill booking too, because it's like, and I'm sure this was the case there, that not having Low-Ki there and not having that Rottweiler's tag was probably a big letdown, right? Initially there, and to be able to at least still get a Homicide match and Homicide in sort of his environment, I think was a nice make good by wXw given the circumstances.
Yeah, definitely. It was like booking on the fly. We knew early on Sunday that Low-Ki was injured. He actually tore his ACL, so he's going to be out for quite a few months, so best wishes to him. He actually injured himself by doing a top rope double foot stomp onto Walter, who was laid out on the ring ramp. And Matthew, who was there from Botchamania, made the joke that Walter's that tough that you can deliver a double foot stomp to him and still injure yourself. But he's actually, when you were looking at it, he did it very safely should have been safely, where 1 foot landed on Walter and 1 foot at the same time would land on the actual ramp to absorb the blow. But I think, he blew out his leg by doing that, unfortunately. So yeah, Low-Ki. I'll talk about Low-Ki at the end, some kind of final takeaways. But we'll get to the final match, which was Ringkampf, who had, how many wins did they have on the show going into this? So
they were 2-1, I believe.
Yeah, they were 2-1. So remind me, who was the team that that beat them?
Rottweilers.
Yeah, it was the Rottweilers. That's right. So yeah, we're going in a massive product. They went in 3-0 on this, so they were going in. I thought, and everyone else thought, this would be a massive product win, which I'll get to in when we wrap this up. Where basically what shocked me about this. So, what did you think of the match?
Well, of course, my perspective on that's a little bit different because I had already seen who won, so I don't have that live experience. And also, if I'm being fully candid, coming into this, I think I would have assumed. I mean, I know. Look, when the matches were announced, I thought Ringkampf was winning. I thought that as soon as I saw the field, I thought that. However, I might have felt differently if I had been in the building with the run that Massive Product had been on. To me, it's either this or the main event from night one were the match of the tournament. I think it really depends on your sort of overall perspective. Like, if you're somebody that was really grabbed by the dream match quality of the Briscoes being in there with Walter and Thatcher, which I could totally understand, you might lean more to night one. If you're somebody that is more invested in wXw storytelling and some of the long-term dynamics that were at play, then I think this match probably would be your pick. If you ask me, if you were forcing me to choose, I would probably choose this match. I would probably, very slight margin, say that I preferred Massive Product to Ring Conf. I thought, to me, the biggest thing was that near fall where they do the spike pile driver and the David Starr tope, and the camera pans over to the facial expression on David Starr's face, when the kick out happens, and it just is awesome. It's one of the better near falls in wrestling this year, probably in the top 3 or 4. Just the face of defeat on David Starr when they would eventually lose, I think, was really telling. The build toward the finish was great. There were points during this match where I think it felt like both teams were the baby faces, which sometimes is a problem, but in this environment it didn't feel that way. Like, they were able to alternate in that back and forth roles, and that's play with that sort of dynamic some. It's a great pro wrestling match, I would probably have it a little bit below Match of the Year contender category, but not by much. I think it's probably on the cusp of being at that level. I think there's some foreshadowing there with things that they did at the finish. I really think that David Starr needs to beat Walter next year at 16 karat, whether it be in an earlier round or to win the entire thing. I think that there's a kernel there, or an ember that needs to turn into a flame. I mean, there's something there with that. And David Starr, should be said, is completely and totally over with these crowds. I mean, he's one of the most over guys on these shows. This is not me being a homer for a U.S. guy. He is a wXw guy, and I think he's really helped that brand grow internationally, too. It probably doesn't get as much credit as he deserves for that with what he did with the Shotgun title. So I loved it. I also even loved the post-match talk, which kind of harkened back to the Walter and Thatcher banter from Inner Circle with the German and English that we talked about earlier in the show. I just thought this was a great capstone to the tournament that delivered on telling the story, whether it be with the spot that had finished everybody else that finally got kicked out of, the sort of element of, is Thatcher going to be every bit the ally that Dieter could be? It put rest any idea of whether or not Jern and Starr were a credible badass team. They held their own with them, and I think it leaves you open for that longer term story with David Starr at a singles level. So I was very high on this match.
Yeah, I was the same. I was really, really high on this match. This is one of my favourite matches of the year. That false finish in it, Dylan, it was, from a live point of view, it was amazing. It was maybe my favourite false finish from a live perspective I've ever seen. It was great because there was a few of us who were typing out results, and there was a gentleman, shout out to him, he's from Rock Bottom Radio here in the UK. It's an actual radio show on a radio station down south, and he had already posted at the 2.99 mark, he posted that Massive Product won because he was that convinced. Press post, and then it ended up being fake news. Saying to him, it's fake news, look at you with your fake news. So yeah, he was actually posted that, and had to, really, really quickly delete. It was that convincing, that near fall. And the real kind of takeaway from this match for me was the Walter and David Starr story keeps going. David Starr can't defeat Walter, but he's getting closer each time. And this time was quite interesting. David Starr was the one that tapped, but he didn't tap to Walter. He tapped to Timothy Thatcher, so he wasn't actually beaten by Walter. Yeah, his team were beaten by Walter's team, but is he getting closer? Is this then going to be the payoff, like you said, Dylan? At 16 carat, he's going to, go and win that tournament. So there's a few things that are open-ended that we think are predictable. That's Ilya winning the title maybe at 16 carat, and David Starr winning, the actual tournament itself. Do you think that they're actually gonna, I wouldn't say swerve us, but they're not gonna give us both because that might be too predictable? Do you think on this occasion it's the time to do both those things on those shows?
I think there's something to be said for playing around with your fan base a little bit, but you don't want to do it to the point of alienating your fan base. And my view is, I don't know if David Starr needs to win 16 karat, but I do know. I mean, I look, if it was me booking, he would. If I'm being completely candid, but I am positive that he needs to beat Walter there. He has to. Like that has to happen. You could do it on the first round in the last match if you want, in the main event, kind of like they did the Briscoes versus Ring Comp this year if you want for tag league. I don't care. They just got to do it. Ilya, I feel I'm more conflicted about because of what we talked about earlier. With do you put that big moment on a show that's theoretically supposed to be about something else? I don't know, maybe, but I mean, who knows? You could even see a situation where they play with us and do something like have the 16 karat be for the wXw title by having, say, Bad Bones do something that is nefarious or whatever. I mean, I'm not necessarily advising that, but I actually think there are a lot of directions that they could potentially go with this. But I do think that ultimately Dragunov needs to get that title sooner rather than later, and David Starr needs to beat Walter at 16 karat. My preference would be in the final, but if not in the final, it needs to happen at the karat shows.
Yeah, I think definitely we need to get that payoff at some point. And I think we will. I think wXw are self-aware enough and are good enough in terms of their long-term storyline directions that they would have known where they're headed to, pretty much. So I think we'll get what we want at the time that they deem right. So just some closing thoughts from me, and then I'll just come to you, Dylan, about the show and the weekend itself. So I went as part of kind of the media. They invite some people over who will do things to help promote wXw. They see the value in that. They're one of the only promotions that kind of embrace that, and because they embraced it so well, they actually got themselves trending. And to you and I, we hear this with WWE, it doesn't mean much to you and me. We can't value that metric. But someone that's looking to maybe gain sponsors and advertisers to say we were trending in Germany on Saturday and Friday, and we were trending in the UK as well on one of those days, maybe massive to them. So we can scoff at things like that, but they were very, very happy with that. But the other thing about the whole inviting people over to kind of cover the shows and raise their profile was they had a media centre. So not backstage, so we weren't allowed backstage, to mill with the wrestlers or anything like that. We were kept separate, and I agreed to do that. But there was an area, in a hall next to the hall where the shows were run, where there was a media centre set up. So what you'd have is you'd have access to Wi-Fi all weekend. You could have, they give us goodie bags, so they'd give us a poster, some bits and bobs, and a lot of the guys were going to say give them away as prizes on shows that they do. So some of the podcasts that are done, I left my poster there because I got it crumpled in the excitement on the first night. But the other bits and bobs, yeah, if anyone wants them, I've got. I don't know what I've got. If you want, anyone who's listening to this, if you want the stuff I've got over the last 2 Carat shows, including kind of a little bag, a DVD. I think there's a T-shirt there. It's an extra large T-shirt. First person that actually messages me when the show drops to say, "Yeah, I heard you talk about that. I want that." That's yours. I'll send that to you because the T-shirt's too big for me. The other bits I'm not going to use. So it's pretty cool that they give away things like that. So the media centre itself, we got the chance to have panel interviews with Tony Storm just after she won 16 Carat. Ilya Dragunov, which was really interesting. We had a good hour chat with Christian Jacobi about his kind of philosophy. I videoed a lot of that and put that on my timeline feed. It's a Periscope upload, so if you check out my timeline on my Twitter, which is @Allan_cheapshot, you can see all these videos. And the Christian Jacobi one's really interesting. If you're a promoter or anyone who's interested in that side of wrestling, please listen to it because he's got some very pertinent points to make. And the one thing that I asked him, which I found interesting, Dylan, which you may not be aware, was I said, so why do you guys not use a 20x20 ring? Because it will make you stand out maybe a bit more against the other independents, and and it's more akin to a WWF style ring. And he said, we used to have a 20-foot ring, but they don't fit in the vans we've got. And they said that wouldn't normally be important, we could get bigger vans. But in Germany, you are not allowed to drive bigger than kind of a ring truck van. You know, a proper truck. You cannot drive a truck on the roads in Germany on a Sunday for environmental reasons. They don't allow it. So that will stifle someone like wXw who need to have a bigger van or a bigger transportation device to get the rings around when they're running Sunday shows. So that was the reason why they have the 18 or the 16, I think it's 18 or maybe 16 by 16 ring. It's because anyone with a standard driving license can drive the ring truck, which obviously helps for anyone to be able to do that. And also, they just couldn't do shows on a Sunday if they had a bigger ring truck. So I found that really interesting. So that was one thing I learned. But to have access to all these guys, ask them questions. We'd have Avalanche one day as well. Like I said, we had Massive Product. We had Jason and Francis Caspin. It's good practice for some of those guys who maybe not used to that side of thing. And it's good exposure for them because we're going to talk about them. We're going to ask them some questions that might be interesting. I mean, at the 16 carat one, we had access to ACH. We had access to Matt Riddle. Some interesting comments that those guys made at the time. ACH was talking a little bit about being Tiger Mask in New Japan, doing the New Japan show, and some of his goals for the year. So having access to these guys, from my perspective, is really, really good, and it works all around, and it's super, super professional. So I just want to get your take on that, Dylan, as someone that's involved with the promoting, and also someone that's quite vocal online. Do you think more promotions should embrace the media, quote-unquote wrestling media, more like this?
Yes. I mean that's kind of the short answer, but in all seriousness, we don't, with Scenic City Invitational, we don't do anything near on that scale. We're nowhere near that professional, frankly. I mean, we try to be, but we have different goals and sort of different capabilities. But, this year, 2016, we did some, we kind of created a Q&A podcast culture at the hotel that we run at, which I think really helped expand the visibility of the tournament and the show beyond just the region. And this year we did the same thing. We actually got a bigger room this year because the room we had last year was so crowded that it became difficult to do. And then this year the room we used was completely packed anyway. I don't know if you saw any of the pictures, but when we did Carney's Q&A, I mean, it was literally wall to wall. Like there was nowhere to sit left. And that's a rather large room. And I generally speaking, I think that promotions, particularly promotions that are running destination-style events, which wXw absolutely is doing and which I believe they do better than anyone, you need to look into that. You need to look into sort of making a media-friendly environment. I mean, to the credit, as we record this, one of the reasons we had to record this so quick and I had to power through without getting the English commentary versions, Allan, was because tomorrow morning I'm getting up early to go to CWF Mid-Atlantic for their big CWF Rumble, and they're doing a fan con, and they're doing some sort of media stuff there, which is, being organized through the fan con people, not directly through the promotion. But I think as a general rule of thumb, that's a good thing for them to be doing. It's obviously CWF is not as big or as ambitious as maybe wXw might be, but they're a promotion that runs 30, 40 shows a year, which is certainly nothing to slouch at an independent level. They produce their own weekly show that you can watch on YouTube, and everybody should. That's a cheap plug for my buddies there at CWF. Much like wXw, they have a lot of local talent that they're trying to integrate with some names that get out and do more, most notably their champion currently, Trevor Lee. So I do think that it's a good sign when a company like CWF, which has more of a traditional territory model, is also thinking about doing some of this stuff, or at least allowing for some of this stuff, right? Because I do think it helps your brand grow. I think it fosters a sense of inclusiveness. I think it gives people a reason to be more invested in your product beyond just, oh, I like this match, or I like this wrestler. So I think it's great that wXw does it. It's one of the reasons why, in my mind, they're the premier destination promotion in the world right now. It's one of the reasons why, I've got a bucket list of events and things that I want to do in wrestling, and I've been very fortunate to do most of those things. The last two things on my bucket list that I really, really want to get to are J-Lit from AIW, just because it's a fun tournament that I've never been to up in Cleveland. But also, and frankly, at the top of the list is 16 Carat. I really want to go. I really, really, really want to get over there. in part because the wrestling is so great, largely because the wrestling is so great, and because wXw is such an interesting and I think cool and aesthetically and environmentally interesting promotion, but also because of stuff like this. There is a fan culture that's around it. There is the inclusiveness with the media, and I think that's huge.
Yeah, having that there is definitely huge. And Christian Jacobi, the promoter of wXw, has talked about it's a wrestling festival. So what his vision is in the future is not just wXw running these weekends. So what they announced on World Tag Team League was they're running a show. There's another venue that's across the parking lot that wXw have run before, but they're actually running a show and they're inviting all the different German promotions to send talent to these shows. So it's different German promotions, not to be into promotional matches because politically that might be awkward. It's more so bring your best talent and let them showcase themselves. So that match is going to be on Saturday afternoon. So this next Carrot's going to be so action packed. There's going to be something for everyone, and there's discussion that there may be more things here as well. So what we're going to have is we're going to have the Inner Circle show again on the Thursday. We have the Friday first night of Carrot. Then on the Saturday we're going to have the Ambition 8 tournament, or the Ambition 9 tournament as it'll be called then. Also, straight after that, there's going to be the German show, and then you're going to have on that night, you're going to have the second night of Carrot, and then the third night of Carrot's going to be on the Sunday. But also what they did this year, they had a live podcast recording that ended up being somewhat of a what's the best word? I didn't attend it, but on the Saturday night they had Rico Bushido, one of the English commentators for wXw. He had a live podcast which he did with Dirty Dragon, one of the wrestlers. And there's also hijinks, a lot of drinking going on. What happened in that room stayed in that room. I was led to believe it started at midnight, so I had an invitation to go to the academy the next morning, so I politely declined the offer on the Friday night and went to the academy the next morning to talk to Thatcher and Walter. That was more kind of what I was interested in. But they're doing more and more things, so it's interesting that they're running this show with these German promotion. And I think if another promotion said, right, you know what, we could actually run a show here as well. There's still room. If the demand's then, even if you only got 200 fans in, you could run a show, a midnight show. Because people like to do that thing where you're having a drink, you're going to a show, it's more of a comedy show on a Saturday night after night to a Carrot, I don't know. Or you could run a show Sunday lunchtime before the main show. So there's opportunity for more things, and it just takes one promoter to see the value in this. Because wXw are open to it and just go for it and run another show on that weekend. So there's some exciting things there. And the other thing I want to touch on briefly before we go is the actual pacing of this tournament in general. It was absolutely excellent. It's very hard for tournaments to be paced well. You know that, Dylan. You being involved with SCI, which I think from what I've seen of it, I've not finished night 2 yet. It was absolutely phenomenal. Really, really good show. People should check that out on powerbomb.tv. The Scenic City Invitational Tournament of 2017. Really, really good. Really enjoyed it. But you have shows where it's run over a weekend like Bowler, and by the third night, everybody's burnt out. Everyone's knackered. It's been a slog to get through. And that's not maybe a bad thing because the quality of matches is fantastic all the way throughout. But this was paced brilliantly. Arguably the best match was the final match. You may disagree. You've said yours is a different match, Dylan. But people, I have no problem with people saying the other match. But it was designed to be the peak, would be the final match on the final night, and it built towards that. So that pacing was absolutely fantastic. And the last thing before I let you give your closing remarks is they used lasers on this show. The production's already awesome, and then basically the last kind of trick they've got up the sleeve is for the main events on night 2 and night 3 they used lasers as well, which enhanced the already fantastic entrances even more to separate them from the other matches. It made them feel even more special. I think that was a really nice touch. They could have had these lasers because they looked awesome throughout the entire weekend. It would have made everything look awesome, but they saved that for the major 2 matches. And I thought again that was a fantastic touch and shows that wXw just think about these little things that separates them from other promotions.
Yeah, I mean, to me, you asked me earlier, and I only partially answered, but I think that in terms of production, obviously WWE, which has like $1 billion, is a better production, I guess. I mean, if you're into the aesthetic WWE does. After that, I don't know. Maybe no one. I mean, maybe WXW's next. And that's not a knock on New Japan. I think New Japan does fine. I just think that there's little detail stuff that I kind of prefer with wXw to what New Japan does. Although I would not be averse to anybody putting New Japan above them, obviously. Certainly that's not controversial or ridiculous. But yeah, WXW just so they're it's a very holistic brand, and they really do try and add as many elements as they can to make the show as exciting as they can in the most holistic way possible. For all the knocking, you and I are probably closer to being pro wrestling traditionalists than a lot of people from the generation that's younger than us. And then a lot of people on wrestling Twitter, for example, if we're being completely honest with ourselves. I think we would both agree to that. But yeah. I would say that there is something to doing having a show that is recognizes the full entertainment value of what wrestling can be in a way that isn't, wrestling is not wrestling, it's sports entertainment. No. At WXW, the wrestling is still the wrestling, but there is entertainment. There's a holistic approach that understands that what you're putting on is an entertainment product that is selling wrestling, as opposed to trying to rebrand wrestling as something else. And I think, in that sense, they are top of the line for anybody on Earth globally. They are an entertainment company, and they are a wrestling company, and they don't shy away from being either. And I think that's outstanding. And I thought the pacing of the shows was great, like you said. I thought the build of the shows of the weekend was great. I probably would agree with you that main event on night 3 was the best match ultimately. There's multiple stories that were woven throughout. They did a good job of integrating their sort of weekly or monthly stories into the shows without subordinating them to the tournament or subordinating the tournament to them, which I think is a very difficult thing to balance out. Here's the thing. Do I think any of these shows were show of the year level shows? No. But if you take the weekend as a whole, which I think is really the fair way to evaluate wrestling tournaments, because it's an overall experience, that's the point, I think this is one of the better, events in wrestling in 2017. And, just very unique from the aesthetic to the cards themselves. I mean, where else are you going to see the Briscoes wrestle outside of Ring of Honor? Where else are you going to see the Rottweilers wrestle high-profile teams? Where else are you going to see, local or native regional acts or national acts where they are be in an environment where they're in the same tournament with an act like EYFBO? Everything came together. Very, very fun, easy to watch events, and it really speaks to why I'm so high on WXW. I don't want to oversell these in the sense that I don't want people to watch these shows and think, oh, these are going to be the best shows of 2017. Every single show is going to be tremendous. No, they're shows that logically built. If you have to view these shows as a whole, I would really encourage people who are going to watch don't cherry pick these shows unless you have to. At the very least, watch all of the tournament matches. Because I really feel like you'll get a greater appreciation for what WXW does if you watch it that way.
Yeah, I think people should spend the time to look at this promotion if you haven't in the past. I think there's plenty of footage out there that's been going back a number of years as well. I mean, they've had Who's Who working for them in the past. They've had Chris Hero winning Carrot before. Brian Danielson's been involved. Tommy End. 3 names just jumping out at me there. Far more than that I'm just, sleeping on at the moment. But yeah, the depth in the catalogue that they've got is really, really good. Even if you had it for a month, hammered it, it'd be a worthwhile investment for a month. It is really, really worth it. So, Dylan, I mean, I've had an absolute hoot revisiting the shows with you. I'd love you to be able to come to Carrot next year. I mean, we've discussed privately how we could make that happen. Obviously, it's a big financial commitment for you to get the flights over from the US over to Germany, but the planets may align and it may happen, and we would get to hang out as well, which would be super, super awesome. We could then debate the intricacies of Big Daddy again if he doesn't get in the Hall of Fame. And it's a big if, he doesn't get in the Hall of Fame this year. You never know. What I'm looking for is for Big Daddy to get 50% and then live on the Hall of Fame ballot forever. You know, as long as he gets 50, and then just to piss off Dave Meltzer, he doesn't get in, fair enough. Get 50 and just be there all the time. That'd be awesome. So yeah, the whole weekend was awesome. I'm expecting big things for Carrot in 6 months. I'm already super excited for it. I may get a countdown clock on my phone just to tell me how many days till Carrot is. It was super fun to meet everyone as well, and that's another thing. Just as a closing thought is getting to meet all the other fans. I mean, German guys, all super friendly. Strigger, I want to shout out to Strigger, driving me back from the Academy show on the first night back to where I was staying. That was super helpful. Other German guys, all really nice. The Brits, awesome, and the Irish, what a great bunch. And I believe at 16 Carat, there's going to be no one in Ireland apart from Rovert, because everyone's going to be over at 16 Carat. So yeah, that's going to be a real hoot to meet more guys. And yeah, we went out for a meal on the final night. So if anyone comes to this, could join us. We all go out for a meal. On the Saturday night, there's an after party where you get to hang out with the wrestlers, drink with the wrestlers. We ended up, going, because I'm an old man now. There was me, Keith Harris, friend of mine, very knowledgeable guy. We had Avalanche with us. We had Martin Bentley. We had other guys like Ollie and Arnold Furious from the Roundtable show on Voices of Wrestling, and a whole host of other guys as well. And it was a super good, super friendly environment. Everyone's friendly, and you just have an amazing weekend. So Dylan, if you can make it out there, I will buy you all your drink and champion you as the hero of the weekend.
Well, I'm easy to buy drinks for because I don't drink alcohol. So Allan,
well, there we go. Then. That's the deal. Then I'll buy the alcohol.
I'm easy. You just give me like a couple bottle of waters and a soda, and I'm good to go. But yeah, like I said, it's on the bucket list, and I obviously I'm not in a position to promise anything, but I can tell you that if it is my priority to try to make it happen as soon as possible. Whether that will be in 2018, I don't know. But I really do want to get to a 16 carat. It is way up on my priority list when it comes to pro wrestling.
It's just the same as me, just as I want to get to an SCI tournament, and I'll make that happen one year as well. So if we both could do that, that would be absolutely phenomenal. So I just want to thank you, Dylan, for spending a large chunk of your day talking wXw World Tag League with me. This podcast is probably one of the longest podcasts I've ever done, but it's been a breeze to get through, especially having someone like you with the takes that you've got and your opinions, and getting your perspective not only from the VOD perspective, but also for someone that's been involved with shows and who's been help booking tournaments. I think it was a really cool insight that you gave this show, so I just want to thank you. So just before we go, Dylan, how can people check you out and do some plugs?
Yeah, you can follow me on social media at Dylan Waco. That's DYLANWACO. If you like weird tweets, you'll probably like my feed. Also, I am the commentator for Southern Underground Pro. That's at SUP_Graps on Twitter. We run out of Nashville. Really cool show. You can watch some of our shows up on the High Spots Wrestling Network. I also do work with Powerbomb.tv, so everybody go subscribe to Powerbomb.tv, where you can watch every Scenic City Invitational related event that has ever happened up until this point. All of them are available there. And of course, I am a co-promoter and co-booker, I guess, for lack of a better way of putting it, even though it always sounds weird to say that out loud, for the Scenic City Invitational and other Scenic City branded shows. You can follow us on Twitter, like I said, at SCI Tournament. We've got Scenic City Trios coming up on November the 18th. And if you're interested in coming to Chattanooga for that, please do. It's I think a loaded lineup. I think we've done a really good job putting on a unique field that features some of the top talent from the Southeast, but also from the Midwest. This is really a passion for me, and it's something I'm really excited to put on. That's going to be at Hickson High School here in the greater Chattanooga area on November the 18th. You can get tickets from me. So if you follow me on Twitter and want to shoot me a DM, $15 for floor seats, $10 for general admission, and I feel pretty confident in saying that with the quality of talent and the quality of wrestling and with the track record of shows we have, you are not going to find a better deal for your wrestling dollar than that.
Well, that's certainly well worth it for people in the area. Definitely check out those shows that Dylan's mentioned, and even if you aren't in the area, check out the Scenic City Invitational shows on Powerbomb.tv. I know I didn't regret it. I've still got to finish night 2, just a time thing, not from a quality perspective why I haven't got to it yet, but that's definitely something I'm hoping to get to in the next week or so. So I just want to thank you, Dylan, and I hope to have some chats with you again on the Pro Wrestling Only feed. So this is Place to Be Nation. You can check out all the other podcasts at Place to Be Nation at placetobenation.com. Currently, Place to Be Nation's running a top 100 WWF project. You can get involved with that on the Facebook group, facebook.com/PlaceToBeNation. You can follow me at Allan_CheapShot on Twitter, where you can see me post stolen gifts on this day in history and all that sort of fun stuff. So thank you very much for listening to the show, and we'll talk to you again after a while.